I walked into the most exclusive country club in Georgia for my son's engagement party, and the first thing I heard was the bride whispering to her friends with a sneer, "The stinky country boy is here." My throat tightened. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, not from shame, but from a deep, quiet anger. I turned to leave to salvage the last shred of my dignity. But my son Bo grabbed my arm. His grip was tight, painful. I expected an apology. I expected him to defend his father. Instead, he leaned in and whispered something that froze the blood in my veins. "Don't you dare walk out of here, old man. I mortgaged your farm this morning. If you leave this party and embarrass me, you will lose everything by sunrise, including Mom's grave. My name is Harlow Kane. I am 67 years old. 40 years I spent bent over Georgia's dark earth, coaxing cotton and soybeans out of the ground until my spine curved and my palms turned to leather. I poured that time into believing I was shaping a boy into something worthy, a man who stood for something. The universities, the fine clothes, every dollar I scraped, I handed it all over, thinking I was planting a legacy that would outlast me. What I found instead, standing beneath those chandeliers while men and women in pressed linen sized me up like something they'd tracked in off the street, was the wreckage of that belief. It wasn't a son I'd raised. It was something that wore my son's face and had none of his soul. And what that thing hadn't yet reckoned with was this: you do not back a man into a corner when the only thing he has left is the ground beneath his feet. That ballroom carried a chill that had nothing to do with the vents overhead. It came from the hush that swallowed the room the instant I cleared those double doors. I was dressed in my Sunday best, a navy suit I had bought 10 years ago for my wife Nadette's funeral. It was clean. Welcome back to Honor Revenge Stories, where the people who get overlooked have a way of having the last word. If stories like this one move something in you, I hope you'll subscribe and pass it along to someone who'd appreciate it. Before we go any further, drop a comment below and tell me, do you think a man who has been patient his whole life can outmaneuver someone who has been scheming for years? I'd love to hear where you think this is heading. A note: before we continue, some details in this story have been shaped for the telling, and any resemblance to real people or events is coincidental. It is the truth underneath the story that matters most. I'd run the iron over it myself that morning on the kitchen board, but I knew what they were seeing. The cuffs were fraying, the cut belonged to a different era, and there was something on my skin no amount of scrubbing would lift. The smell of earth, the smell of a life earned the hard way. Sloane Whitley held the center of that room, the way a diamond holds the light cold, flawless and cutting. She was beautiful, the way a blade is beautiful. A glass of champagne hung from one hand, and the other drifted in front of her face, fanning the air like something rotten had drifted past. Her circle women with matching blonde hair and matching cruel smiles rippled with laughter. "Look at him," Sloane said loud enough that heads turned. "He looks like he just crawled out of a tractor. Bo, did you not tell your father to shower before coming to a place like this?" That laughter hit me like shattering glass. Every shard found a mark. I stood there turning my old hat in my hands. Words rose in my throat. I wanted to tell them this suit was bought with honest wages, that the scent they mocked was the scent of the soil that kept them fed. But before I could draw breath, a security guard in a blazer that cost more than my truck stepped into my path. "Sir," he said, his voice quiet and full of contempt. "The service entrance is around back. Deliveries don't come through the main lobby." He had me figured for the help. Someone there to haul produce or carry out the garbage. I turned to Bo, my son, my only child, standing beside Sloane in a tuxedo, cut to fit him like a second skin. He looked like them. He moved like them. His eyes found mine, and there was nothing in them. No warmth, no recognition of what I was to him. Only irritation. He didn't step forward and say, "That's my father." He didn't wave the guard off. He raised his glass, took a slow sip, and glanced away. That was all I needed to see. I had weathered droughts. I had outlasted floods. I had survived burying my beloved Nadette. I was not going to stand here and take this. I turned my back on the chandelier light and the laughter and put my hand on the brass door handle. I was going to walk to my truck, head home, settle onto my porch, and let my son be dead to me. I never got through the door. Bo covered the distance between us faster than I'd have credited him. His hand closed around my bicep like a vice. Those fingers weren't greeting me. They were holding me in place. "Where exactly do you think you're headed?" he hissed, expensive scotch and mint on his breath. "I'm going home, Bo," I said, holding my voice level. "It's plain I'm not welcome, and I won't stay anywhere. I'm not treated like a man." "You're staying," he said. His voice dropped to something low and venomous meant only for my ears. "You're going to walk back in there. You're going to smile. You're going to shake hands with Prescott and Lorinda. And you're going to play the grateful, happy country bumpkin father." "Why would I do a thing like that?" I asked, trying to pull free. "Because you don't have a choice," Bo said. And then he detonated the words that unmade my world. "I forged your signature this morning, Dad. The power of attorney you signed last year for the tractor loan, I used it. I put up the whole farm as collateral, the house, the fields, the barn, every acre." I stopped pulling. The room seemed to lean sideways. "You did what?" "I've got debts, Dad." The arrogance cracked for just a moment, and what showed through was raw panic. "Crypto poker. It doesn't matter the details. The number is bad. I needed something to borrow against, so I used the farm. If you walk out of here and blow up this engagement, Prescott pulls his investment from my firm. If that money disappears, I can't cover the payments. Miss tomorrow morning's payment and the bank takes your land." He brought his face within inches of mine. His eyes had gone wild. "Mom is in the ground under the oak tree behind the house, Dad. If the bank seizes the property, they'll move her to put in a subdivision. Do you want that? Do you want them bulldozing her grave because you were too proud to sit through a party and eat cold appetizers?" I searched his face for the boy who used to tear through the cornfields at a dead sprint, laughing until he couldn't breathe. I searched for the young man who wept at his mother's graveside and swore he'd protect what she left behind. He wasn't there. The man holding my arm was a stranger, desperate, hollow, willing to sell my life to keep himself afloat. A coldness moved through my chest. Not fear, something weightier than fear. It was hope going out. "All right," I said. My own voice sounded distant to me. "I'll stay," Good Bo said at once, releasing my arm and smoothing his jacket in one practiced motion. He put on a bright, empty smile for the room. "That's a good boy. Now go sit down." He said Sloan had set a table for me. He gestured toward the far corner, tucked in the shadow, beside the swinging kitchen doors and the restrooms. A table meant to be forgotten. I crossed the room to it, feeling the guests' eyes track me the whole way. Their whispers followed. "Is that the father? Why does he look like that?" I sat. The chair rocked on uneven legs. No flowers on the table, no candle, just a half-empty breadbasket that looked like it had been slid over from somewhere else. I sat in that corner while the party moved and gleamed around me. I watched my son laugh with men whose hands had never known a day's real labor. I watched him kiss Sloan, the woman who'd called me Stinky, and understood they were well matched. Both of them carved from the same hollow wood. A shadow crossed my table. I looked up. Prescott Whitley, Sloan's father, the man at the top of this particular nest. Tall, silver-haired, his face cut from the kind of stone that money buys over generations. A cigar in one hand, a tumbler of whiskey in the other. He didn't offer me anything. "So, you're Harlow," he said. Not a question. The tone of a man naming a weed in his garden. "I am," I said. I didn't rise from my chair. Prescott surveyed the room. All the splendor he had almost certainly financed with money that wasn't entirely his, then bent down, bringing his face level with mine. Old leather and self-satisfaction came off him in waves. "Old Bo tells me you're sitting on about 500 acres out on Highway 17, he said. "That's right," I said. 3 generations of my family have worked that ground." Prescott let out a dry chuckle. 3 generations of dirt farmers. What a thing to spend a life on. "You know, Harlow, I'm a developer by trade. I have a vision." He swept his cigar through the air, scattering ash across the tablecloth beside my hand. "When Bo and Sloan come into that property, and they will sooner rather than later, things are going to look very different. That farmhouse, the one with the rotting wood, will tear it down and burn the scraps. It's an eyesore. Those cornfields are going flat. We'll put in an 18-hole course, maybe a clubhouse right where your barn is standing now." He smiled. The kind of smile a shark wears. "It'll be an improvement, Harlow. It'll finally smell like money instead of manure. Your son is marrying into something better. He's raising the waterline for your whole bloodline. Try not to embarrass him by making too much noise tonight." He gave my shoulder 2 hard, slow pats, the kind you'd give a dog you didn't particularly like, and walked back toward his wife Lorinda, who was busy finding fault with the waitstaff. I sat there like I'd been nailed to the chair. My hand had closed around a fork so tightly the metal was starting to give. Burn it down. He meant to burn down the house where Nadette and I had spent 40 years, where we raised Bo, where I'd held Nadette's hand as the breath left her body. He meant to pave over the soil my grandfather had purchased with his freedom money. He meant to grind my life's work into a golf course for men who had never fed anyone. And Beau, my son, he had known this. He had agreed to it. He hadn't forged my signature just to settle a debt. He had handed everything I'd built over to these people like it was nothing. I looked at the breadbasket. I looked at the kitchen doors banging open and shut, flashing glimpses of the staff inside, moving fast, sweating heads down, keeping the whole show running. They felt more like kin to me than a single person in that glittering room. Something changed in me then. Not a feeling exactly, more like a sound. A click the way a bolt sounds when it seats into a lock, or a hammer when it draws back. The grief was gone. I wasn't ashamed of the suit or the smell. I was a farmer, and any farmer worth his salt knows that. Before a new crop goes in, you sometimes have to clear the field first, burn it down, drive out the pests. Beau believed he had me cornered. He figured the mortgage threat and his mother's resting place would be enough to make me docile, that I was just a senile old man who'd put his name on anything to protect his boy. He had me wrong. My hand slipped into the inner pocket of my jacket and found the cool surface of my old prepaid phone. I didn't reach for it often, but there was one number I carried in my head without needing to look it up. Gideon. Gideon wasn't the kind of lawyer with his face on a highway billboard. He was the man who sat beside me in the mud in Vietnam 50 years ago. The man who hauled me 3 miles through the dark after shrapnel tore into my leg. These days he was the sharpest land rights attorney in the state, even if he worked out of a narrow office above a hardware store. 5 years back, when I first saw that gleam of greed taking root in Beau's eyes, Gideon and I had built a safeguard, a legal structure around the farm that Beau had never been told about. I watched Beau at the head table, glass raised laughing, easy looking like a man who had already cashed the check. I opened the phone under the table. My fingers were thick and slow on the small keys, but I didn't slip. Code red. The rats are in the corn. Activate Protocol B. I pressed send. Drew a breath. The ballroom still reeked of expensive perfume and hollow celebration. But under all of it, just barely, I caught something else. The particular quality of air that comes before a storm rolls in. I pulled a roll from the basket and bit into it. Stale. I chewed it slow and deliberate. I wasn't moving. Not yet. I was going to sit right there and let them revel in it. Let them rise as high as they pleased. The higher they climbed, the more ground they'd have to fall when I knocked the ladder loose. Beau glanced over at me and caught me eating the bread. He smirked and bent to say something in Sloane's ear. She laughed. As far as they were concerned, I was already beaten the stinky country boy, grateful for a leftover crust. Enjoy it, son, I thought to myself. Drink the champagne. It's the last thing you'll ever taste that wasn't bought with your own sweat. A waiter passed and a napkin dropped to the floor. I reached for it. Sir, allow me, the waiter said, moving quickly toward it. No, son, I said, my voice low and even. I've got it. I wiped my mouth and set the napkin on the table. Let the games begin. The hallway beyond those double doors was quiet and cool. Beau had my arm and he wasn't letting go. He pulled me past kitchen workers who kept their eyes on the floor, past security guards who watched with smug expressions. We weren't heading for the exit. We were moving deeper into the club, into the private wing where the real dealings got done behind closed doors. Beau stopped at a heavy mahogany door and pushed it open. Inside, the air carried the ghost of old cigar smoke and lemon polish. It was some kind of library or study shelves lined with books that had never once been opened. Sloane was already perched on the edge of a massive leather desk, swinging her legs like she had nowhere more pressing to be. Beside her stood a man I'd never laid eyes on. His suit was too shiny, his smile too sharp. He held a leather briefcase against his chest, like a man clutching a life preserver. Close the door, Beau said. He steered me into a chair, a low one, the kind designed to leave you looking up at everyone else in the room. I sat and rested my hat on my knees. I watched my son pace the floor, both hands raking through his hair. He had the look of a trapped animal. What is all this? I asked, keeping my voice still. This is the answer, Sloane said. She slid off the desk and lifted a sheaf of papers from the briefcase man's hands. She dropped them in front of me. They skated across the polished wood and came to rest just short of my fingers. Sign it, she said. I looked down at the top page. General Durable Power of Attorney. I knew those words. I'd seen them up close when my own father's mind started going, and we'd had to step in to care for him. But I wasn't my father. My mind was as keen as a freshly sharpened plow blade. This hands you control over everything I said, looking up at Bo. Bank accounts, medical decisions, the farm. It's for your own protection, Dad, Bo said, halting his pacing. He leaned back against the fireplace mantel, trying to look relaxed, but his eyes were jumping around. You're getting on in years. Your memory slips. We don't want you falling for some con man who'll take everything you've built. We'll look after the farm, handle the accounts. You won't have a worry in the world. You mean I won't have a worry because I won't have anything to worry about, I said. Stop being so dramatic. Sloan cut in. You're senile, Harlow. Anyone can see it. You talk to Mom like she's still in the next room. You can't keep track of your own keys. Last week you left the tractor running in the barn. That was a lie. I never left the tractor running. Fuel costs too much for that kind of carelessness. But I could see what they were constructing. A story, a version of me built to serve their purposes. I'm not signing this, I said. I got to my feet. I'm walking out. Bo moved like a striking snake. His hand came down on the desk with a crack that rattled the papers. It rang through the small room like a shot. You are not going anywhere, he said, his voice cracking at the top. His face had gone red, and the cords in his neck stood out. You are going to put your name on that paper right now. Or what, I said, holding his gaze. You'll mortgage the farm. You already did that. Drive me off the property. That's already the plan. What exactly is left for you to take? Bobo's expression shifted. The anger drained out, and what replaced it was something colder, a smile. His face, wrong in every way. I can take your name, he said quietly. That stopped me cold. Do you think the people in this town know what happened in 1979? He asked, his voice almost gentle. Do you think Prescott and Lorinda know that their daughter is marrying the son of a convicted felon? The air went out of me. 1979, the year that swallowed 2 years of my life. I was 22 years old, driving back from a late shift at the mill. A store had been robbed 3 towns over, and the police were looking for a black man in a truck. Any black man. Any truck. They stopped me. They put a gun under my seat. I spent 24 months in a cell barely big enough to turn around in before the real robber was caught and told the truth. I was exonerated. My record was expunged, but the shame, the memory of that cage, the smell of the prison yard, none of that ever left. Nobody in this town had ever heard it from me, except Nadette. And Nadette had told Bo on her deathbed, asking him to swear he'd never hold it against me. Now he was aiming it at me like a rifle. Picture the headlines. Bo went on, his tone smooth and poisonous. Local farmer concealed violent criminal past. Fraud, theft, who knows what else we could surface or fabricate. If you don't sign, I'll put the mugshot out there. I'll tell anyone who'll listen that you're a danger to the community. I will bury your reputation so deep that you won't be able to walk into a feed store in this county without people crossing the street. I looked at my son and felt something inside me go dark. The last small flame of belief that he was only lost or desperate, it went out. What I was looking at was evil, plain, methodical, deliberate evil. He was prepared to torch his own father's history to pave his own road forward. I lowered myself back into the chair. I let my shoulders fall. I let my hands shake. I needed them to see a man who was broken. I needed them to believe they had won. You made your mother a promise, I said softly. You swore to her you'd never speak of that. Mom's gone. Bo said, his voice flat and empty. And business is business. Sign the papers, Dad. Don't make me do what I'll do. I looked at the documents laid out in front of me. I looked at the lawyer standing off to the side, studying the ceiling, pretending he couldn't hear a man being blackmailed 6 feet away. I glanced at Sloan, who had gone back to checking herself in her compact mirror, and then it came back to me. A rainy afternoon 5 years prior. I was sitting across from Gideon in his narrow office above a hardware store, the kind of room that smelled of sawdust and old paper. Gideon had poured us 2 fingers of cheap rye whiskey. Harlow, he'd said, if that boy of yours ever turns, he's going after the land. It's the only thing he values. What can I do about it? I'd asked. We separated, Gideon had said. We split the atom. In this state, land ownership and mineral rights can be 2 entirely different legal things. You hold the surface rights in your own name, the dirt, the corn, the house. But the mineral rights, everything below the grassroots, we place into a separate LLC, a holding company, and we make you an employee of that company rather than the owner. I had signed those papers that same afternoon. I never expected to need them. I had no reason to think there was anything under my soil worth fighting over besides worms and stones. But Gideon was a cautious man, and I trusted him with my life. Black Soil Minerals, LLC, held title to everything beneath my feet. And the sole beneficiary of that company was not me, and it surely wasn't Beau. It was a charitable trust established in Nadette's name. Beau could sell the surface. He could lay down a golf course. He could pave every inch of it. But he could not touch what lay below. And if he ever tried to dig, tried to develop that ground, he would need the consent of the mineral rights holder, me. He just didn't know that yet. He looked at my farm and saw one solid piece of pie. He had no idea I'd already eaten the filling and left him the bare crust. I looked up at Beau. I let a tear slide down my face. It wasn't hard to summon. I was grieving my son, not my land. Please, I said, my voice breaking at the edges. Please don't send me away from that house. It's all I have left. Nadette is there. Sign the paper, old man, Sloane said, snapping her compact shut. Quit begging. It's embarrassing. I reached for the pen. My hand trembled. I made sure it trembled. I held the tip of the pen just above the signature line. I'll sign, I said quietly. But I need your word that 1979 stays buried. You have my word, Beau said at once. His eyes were fixed on the pen like a starving man watching food. I pressed the pen to the paper. I wrote my name, Harlow Kane. But I added something else, something Gideon had drilled into me long ago. If you're ever forced to sign against your will, Gideon had said, if someone has a gun to your head or a blade at your throat, sign your name, but leave the tail off the S, and put a small dot right after your first name. That's our signal. That means duress. That means the signature carries no legal weight. I wrote Harlow. I placed the dot. I wrote Kane. I let the S finish without the curving underline I had put on every document and check for 40 years. It looked convincing. To anyone who hadn't been told, it read like the shaky mark of a man who had given up. I slid the paper across the desk. Beau snatched it. He didn't study the letters. He didn't notice the dot. All he saw was his victory. He grinned and passed the paper to the lawyer, who stamped it without a word. Done, Beau said. He exhaled like a man setting down a heavy load. He looked over at me, and something shifted in his face. The mask of the desperate son peeled away, and the face of a landlord took its place. Get out, he said. I'm sorry, I said. Get out of my office, Beau said. Get out of this party and get out of my house. You have 24 hours to gather your things. But you said you'd manage the assets. I said, letting my voice waver. You promised I'd be taken care of. You will be, Sloane said, smiling like she meant it. We've found a lovely facility for you. State-run, so there's no cost to worry about. They handle severe dementia cases. You'll fit right in. The county poorhouse. The place they sent people when no one wanted them anymore. That was their endgame. They weren't planning to care for me at all. They were planning to dispose of me. I got to my feet. I didn't need to fake the unsteadiness this time. My legs felt hollow, not from fear, but from the sheer crushing weight of what my own child had done. You are my son, I said softly. I'm a businessman, Beau said, and you're a liability. Leave now before I have you removed. I turned and walked toward the door. I pulled it open, and the noise of the party broke over me. Laughter, music, the chime of crystal, a celebration built on my life's work. I walked out of that office and didn't look back once. I moved through the kitchen, past the startled cooks, and pushed out the back door into the cool dark of the night. I stood in the parking lot beside my old truck. I looked up at the moon, the same moon that hung over my fields, the same moon that watched over Nadette's grave. Beau had the paper. He believed he had the power. He was certain he had won. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I called Gideon's number. It's done, I said. Did you sign? Gideon asked, his voice gravelly and rough. I signed, I said. With the dot and without the tail. Good, Gideon said. They took the bait. Now we wait. Wait for what I asked. Wait for them to dig, Gideon said. The sun hadn't even begun to color the horizon when the noise started. It wasn't the familiar rumble of my old tractor or the morning crow of the rooster that I'd woken to for decades. It was a deep mechanical growl that came up through the floorboards, like something underground had stirred, heavy and low and hungry sounding. I was at the kitchen table working through a cup of black coffee, trying to rinse the bitterness of the night before out of my throat. That signature sat on my conscience like a wound. I had figured I had 24 hours. Beau had said 24 hours to pack. But the growling outside told me the wolves weren't inclined to wait. I crossed to the window and pulled the curtain back. My heart lurched. A convoy was coming up my driveway, not pickup trucks. These were massive flatbeds hauling heavy iron yellow excavators, bulldozers with blades as wide as my living room wall. They moved like an armored column, rolling into a quiet country. Out front was a white SUV bearing the logo of a survey company on its door. They didn't come to the house. They didn't knock. They rolled straight past the porch and cut off the gravel road directly into the south pasture. No, I said, barely a whisper. The south pasture wasn't just a field. That was where Nadette had planted her zinnias 40 years ago. Every spring that ground burst open in color, red, orange, pink, blazing in every direction. Her pride. The place we took our anniversary photographs every year without fail. The one corner of the farm I'd never broken for crops because Nadette said the earth had as much right to be beautiful as it did to be useful. The lead bulldozer dropped its blade. The sound that followed metal ripping into earth turned my stomach. It tore through the dormant flower beds, heaving the dark soil up in long, ugly furrows. I didn't reason through what happened next. I just moved. I went straight to the gun cabinet by the back door. My hands were steady. The shaking from the lawyer's office was gone, burned away by a fury that was cold and clear and absolute. I took out my double-barrel shotgun. I didn't load it. I had no intention of shooting a single soul, but in Georgia, a man stepping out with a shotgun speaks a language that needs no translation. I pushed the screen door open with my boot and walked out onto the porch. The morning air was cool against my face, but I was burning underneath it. "Get off my land," I shouted, putting everything I had behind it. My voice cut clean through the engine noise. The man in the white SUV climbed out. Heavy-set clipboard in hand, bright orange safety vest. He looked at me. He looked at the gun. He didn't raise his hands. He wasn't frightened. He looked put upon, the expression of a man interrupted during routine work. He waved to the bulldozer operator to kill the engine. The silence that dropped over the pasture was thick. "You are trespassing," I called out, coming down the porch steps. "Turn those machines around or I'll have the sheriff out here." The man in the orange vest produced a thin, tired smile. He walked toward me, and we met roughly halfway between the porch and what was left of Nadette's garden. "Mr. Kane, I presume," he said. "Put that thing away before somebody gets hurt. We're not trespassing. We have a work order." He unfolded a sheet of paper from his clipboard and extended it toward me. I didn't reach for it. I kept my hands where they were. I didn't authorize any work, I said. "This is my property, and your machine just tore through my wife's garden." "Your son ordered it," the man said. "Bo Kane, he called us at 6 o'clock this morning, said it was an emergency rush job, wants the soil samples and the topographical survey wrapped up by noon." Bo. He hadn't even let the ink set, hadn't given me time to pull a single drawer open. He was wiping me off the map. He was wiping Nadette off the map. "I don't care what my son told you," I said, my voice sharp as a blade. "He doesn't hold title to this land yet. I do. Now get your crew off my property." The man let out a slow sigh and rattled the paper in my direction. "Look, old-timer, I'm not here for a fight. But what I'm holding is a copy of a general power of attorney signed and notarized yesterday evening. It gives your son full legal authority over this property. In the eyes of the law, his word is your word." And his word was dig. He jabbed a finger toward the bulldozer. "Now you can stand out here with that unloaded gun and catch a menacing charge, or you can go back inside and start packing like a sensible man. Pull that trigger and you'll die in a cell. Call the sheriff and he'll read this same document and tell you everything I just told you. You signed your rights away, Mr. Kane. Don't be angry with me because you're having second thoughts." He turned his back on me and raised a hand toward the bulldozer operator. "Fire it up!" he called out. The engine thundered back to life. Black smoke rolled up into the clean morning sky. The blade came down again, crushing what remained of the zinnias, churning my memories into dark mud. I just stood there. The shotgun had never felt so heavy or so useless. The man was right. I had put my name on that paper. I'd done it to protect my reputation, and in doing so, I had handed over my sanctuary. I stood watching them work for another minute, feeling each cut of that blade like something tearing inside my chest. Then, I turned and went back into the house. I shut the door and threw the lock as though that would hold any of it at bay. I needed help. I needed to understand what I was truly up against. I went to the kitchen, picked up my phone, and dialed Gideon. It rang 4 times before the line opened. Harlow Gideon said, his voice thick with sleep. "It is 7 in the morning. Did you do it?" "They're already here, Gideon," I said. My voice was unsteady. "Bulldozers. They're tearing up Nadette's garden. Bo sent them. I know, Gideon said. I saw the filing. Bo didn't lose a minute. He had that power of attorney registered with the county clerk by 8 a.m. sharp. But Harlow, hear me out. I've been up all night. I dug into the people backing this whole operation. The Whitleys. What about them, I asked. Outside men in vests were pressing red flags into the soil, staking out where the concrete would go. They are a house of cards, Harlow Gideon said. His voice dropped low and deliberate. I ran a full asset check. I have a contact at the bank they use in Charlotte. Prescott Whitley isn't the tycoon he plays on TV. He's a man going under fast. What do you mean going under? I asked. Broke, Gideon said. Completely dry. They're carrying $15 million in debt to creditors spread across the South. They've mortgaged everything they own to the hilt. Their 50-foot sailboat is about to be repossessed. That country club membership is probably the one thing they haven't let go of yet, because they need it to keep up the performance. I leaned back against the kitchen counter. $15 million, a figure that had no floor I could find. So, why do they want my farm? I asked. It isn't worth that kind of money. It's collateral, Gideon said. Fresh meat. They need a clean, unencumbered asset to put in front of the bank. Show that they control 500 acres of prime development land, and the bank extends their credit line. They pull a construction loan for the golf course, probably $20 million. They use that to service the interest on the old debts and keep the whole performance running for another year. It's a Ponzi scheme, I said. Exactly, Gideon said. And Bo is the mark. He thinks he's marrying into old money and becoming a genuine partner, but they're using him. His clean credit and your land are what they need to stay above water. Once they lock in the loan, they'll drain the project and leave Bo holding every bit of the wreckage. Your son isn't just selling you out, Harlow. He's walking into something that's going to swallow him whole. I looked out through the glass again. The bulldozer was grinding toward the barn now. Bo wasn't only a villain in this story. He was a fool. A desperate, hungry fool being played by people whose appetites dwarfed his own. He was tearing up his birthright to buy passage on a vessel that was already sinking. So we stop them, I said. We bring out the mineral rights. We show them the LLC paperwork. We tell them they can't break ground for any golf course because Black Soil Minerals LLC hasn't authorized it. We can, Gideon said. I can file an injunction this morning and have a deputy out there within the hour to shut those machines down. We reveal that the subsurface rights belong to the trust and that no development can proceed without its consent. It stops the loan cold. It saves the farm today. I open my mouth to say do it, to tell him to save my home, to save Nadette's garden. But I stop myself. If we shut this down now, Bo learns nothing. If we shut this down now, Prescott Whitley dusts himself off and goes looking for his next victim. If we shut this down now, I'm just the bitter old man who torpedoed his son's future. Bo will carry that resentment the rest of his life. He will never see that I pulled him back from the edge. I turned to the photograph of Nadette on the mantel. She was smiling in it. She always was. She used to tell me I was too easy on the boy, said I cushioned him too much from the world. Let him fall, Harlow. That's what she'd say. A man doesn't learn anything until the ground comes up to meet him, Gideon, I said. Yeah, Harlow. Don't file the injunction. The line went quiet. What let them dig, I said. My voice had gone flat and hard. Let them run their survey. Let them draft their blueprints. Let them walk into the bank. Let them put their signatures on the loan papers. Harlow, are you certain about this? Gideon asked. They are tearing up your property as we speak. Let them, I said again. I need them to believe they've already won. I need Prescott to taste that money. I need Bo to feel like the big man at the table. I need both of them so high up they've lost sight of the ground. Why, Gideon asked. Because if I knock the ladder away now, they drop a few feet, I said. Shake it off and start climbing again. I don't want that. I want them broken clean. I want Bo to see exactly what these people are. And I want the Whitleys to feel the kind of pain they've been dealing out to people like me their entire lives. I watched through the window as the bulldozer pushed over a fence post. My father had set that post in the ground 50 years ago. It landed in the dirt like something that mattered being discarded. It hurt. It hurt the way a fist to the chest hurts, but I held it down. Let them secure the loan, I said. Let them put everything they've got left into this project. And when they're fully committed, when walking away isn't an option anymore, that's when we pull the floor out. You are a hard man, Harlow Kane, Gideon said. I never quite saw it before. The soil is hard, Gideon, I said. That's what makes it produce. So we wait, Gideon said. We wait, I said. I'm gonna pack a bag. I'm gonna let them run me off. I'm going to go to that state facility or wherever they've arranged to put me. I'll play the role they've written for me. All right, Gideon said. I'll have everything ready to go. But Harlow, watching them tear through your home is going to be a particular kind of hell. I know that, I said. I watched the bulldozer scrape along the side of the barn. But I've walked through hell before. This time, I'm the one carrying the fire. I put the phone down. I didn't look out the window again. I went to the bedroom and dragged my old suitcase out from under the bed. I packed my clothes. I packed Nadette's photograph. I packed my Bible. Everything else I left where it stood. The furniture, the dishes, the accumulated weight of a shared life. It was only things. The real inheritance was in the soil, and the soil wasn't going anywhere. I walked out the front door past the survey crew, who paid me no mind past the bright orange flags marking the end of everything I had built. I got in my truck and I drove. As I swung out onto the main road, I spotted Beau's car coming fast in the other direction, headed for the house. He was coming to watch, coming to make sure I was truly gone. I didn't wave. I just gripped that steering wheel and kept driving. Go on ahead, son, I thought. Build your castle. But the ground you're building it on doesn't belong to you. And when the earth cracks open and pulls you down, don't come looking for my hand to lift you out. You're the one who dug this hole. Now you've got to lie down in it. The black Cadillac Escalade sat in front of my porch like a spaceship that had landed in the wrong world, gleaming spotless, worth more than every piece of equipment I owned out in that barn put together. Beau and Sloan climbed out and stepped down into the dust of the driveway. Sloan had on white stiletto heels. I watched from the rocking chair as those heels sank straight into the soft Georgia red clay. She let out a shriek of disgust that scattered every crow from the pecan tree. I didn't move to help her. I just kept on rocking. The chair creaked its familiar rhythm, the same one I'd known for 40 years. They walked toward the house the way someone walks toward a crime scene, slow, suspicious, holding themselves apart from it. Sloan had a silk handkerchief pressed over her nose. She studied the peeling paint along the railings. She looked at the empty flower pots, the ones the bulldozers had left hollow when they crushed the garden. Then she looked at me. "This place is a disaster," she said, not a whisper of verdict. She didn't even bother with hello. Beau stepped up behind her designer jeans and a polo shirt, fitted one size too tight. He stood there looking at the house where he'd taken his first steps, and what I saw behind his eyes wasn't memory. It was math. "It's rough, babe," Beau said, settling a hand on her waist. "But the bones of the land are solid. We just need to clear the debris." Debris. That was the word he chose for the home I built with my own two hands. That was the word he used for the roof that kept the storms off his head when he was small. Sloan climbed the steps and gave a loose board a kick. A chunk of rotten wood broke away and clattered down to the ground. "It's not just rough, Beau," she said. "It's a health hazard. Look at this wood, it's infested. The whole structure is probably crawling with termites and mold. There's no renovating this. It would cost a fortune just to bring it up to code for the clubhouse." She turned to him and leveled a manicured finger at my front door. "Burn it," she said. Those words hung in the air like smoke from a brush fire. "Burn it." She wanted to put a torch to the kitchen where Nadette had taught Beau to bake cornbread. She wanted to burn the living room where we used to open Christmas presents. She wanted to burn the bedroom where I still slept on my side of the bed, leaving space for a ghost. Beau looked at me, then back at the house. For just a beat, I thought maybe something would stir in him. I thought he might remember the height chart we'd notched into the pantry doorframe. I thought he might hear the echo of all those nights we sat on this porch listening to the rain fall. "Burn it," Beau agreed. He nodded. "You're right, babe. It's trash. We'll level it. A controlled burn runs cheaper than a full demolition anyway. We can call it an electrical fire and maybe pull a little extra from the insurance before we break ground on the golf course." He was talking about arson now. He was talking about insurance fraud. And he was saying it all directly in front of me because in his mind, I was already gone. He figured I was just another piece of furniture waiting to be hauled off. The rage built in my chest hot and sharp as a blade. I wanted to rise out of that chair. I wanted to grab him by the collar and send him off my porch. I wanted to tell him that the only trash on this property was standing right in front of me. But I remembered what Gideon had told me. Let them climb Harlow. Let them believe they're untouchable. So I swallowed that rage whole. Let it burn a hole through my stomach, lining, and I dropped my shoulders. I let my jaw go loose. I made my eyes go glassy and far away. It was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. I had to become the frail, confused old man they needed me to be. I looked up at Bo and blinked slow. "Is your mother coming home soon, son?" I asked it in a thin, wavering voice. "She went to the market this morning for flour for the biscuits. She ought to be back by now. The stove's gone cold." Bo went still. He studied me and his eyes narrowed. Then a slow, mean smile crept across his face. He glanced over at Sloane. "Did you hear that?" he asked. "Hear what?" Sloane said, eyeing her mud-caked shoes with contempt. "He thinks Mom's at the market," Bo said. A laugh came out of him, short and sharp like a bark. "Mom's been dead for 10 years, Sloane. He's completely lost it." Sloane looked at me. The disgust on her face softened into something worse. It was the expression of a predator that's just noticed a limp. "Are you serious?" she asked. "He doesn't know she's gone?" "I'll watch this," Bo said. He bent down and spoke to me loud and slow, the way you talk to someone who can't hear. Mom isn't coming home. Mom is gone. Do you remember?" I creased my brow. I let my eyes drift around the yard like I was searching for something I couldn't name. "Gone?" I repeated. "No, she said she was making peach cobbler. She promised. Why is she taking so long? I'm hungry, Bo. Where's my supper?" Ibawan may si by nurse." Bo straightened up and clapped his hands together. "This is perfect," he said to Sloane. "You see this? This right here is the golden ticket." "What do you mean?" Sloane asked. "The competency hearing," Bo said. "We don't need to forge anything complicated. We don't need to pay off doctors to lie for us. We just need to record him. If Judge Orville watches this, if he sees him calling out for his dead wife, he'll hand me guardianship in 5 minutes flat. Slam dunk. We can have him in the state facility before the week's out." Sloane smiled. It was the kind of smile that belongs on something with teeth. "Can we do it before the wedding?" she asked. "I don't want him there, Bo. You saw how he was at the engagement party. He's an embarrassment. If he starts asking for dead people in front of my father, I will die of shame." "We'll try," Bo said. "But even if we can't get the court order by Saturday, we'll keep him out of the way. Stick him at some table in the back. After the honeymoon, though he's gone. I promise you, babe, he'll be in a padded room, and you and I will be right here on this porch with a glass of wine." They mapped out my imprisonment right there in front of my face. They planned the dismantling of my life the way you discuss putting down a dog. They didn't drop their voices. Didn't see any reason to. As far as they were concerned, I wasn't a person anymore. I was a problem that needed handling. I dropped my gaze to my hands so they wouldn't catch the sharpness still living in my eyes. I thought about Nadette. I thought about how she would have slapped Bo clear into next week for talking like this. But I held on to her memory like a coal. I used the ache of her absence to keep my mind clean and hard. "I'm thirsty," I mumbled. I gripped both armrests of the rocking chair. "Can I have some sweet tea? Nadette always makes the tea." Bo rolled his eyes. "Go make your own tea, Dad," he said, already looking away. "Go on inside and play in the kitchen while the adults talk." I pushed to my feet, made sure I was slow about it, made sure I stumbled a little. I leaned hard into the doorframe. "I'll make tea," I said. "I'll make tea for the guests. Nadette would want me to be polite." I shuffled into the house. The moment the screen door banged shut behind me, my back went straight. The cloudiness left my eyes. I moved quick and quiet across the living room to the old roll-top desk sitting in the corner. I pulled open the bottom drawer and reached deep into the back, past the stacked boxes of old tax returns. My hand found a small, cold piece of metal. A listening device. Not the kind you order online. This was military surplus, a relic from Gideon's days working in intelligence. No bigger than a quarter, with a battery that would run 3 days straight. I'd been holding onto it for exactly a moment like this. I closed my fingers around it and slipped it into my pocket. Then I went to the kitchen, set the kettle on the burner just to make noise, rattled a few cups around. I needed them to hear the sounds of a confused old man puttering and think nothing of it. Through the window, I could see them out on the porch. Sloane had set her bag down on the railing, a Bottega Veneta bag, cream leather, worth more than my truck. She stood with her back to it, phone raised above her head. She was live streaming. "Hey guys," she was saying into her phone, her voice climbing an octave into a bright, hollow cheerfulness. "Just getting a look at the new property. It's a bit of a fixer-upper at the moment, but wait until you see what we turn it into. We are going to have the most incredible clubhouse right here." Bo stood beside her, working the camera with a grin. I filled 3 cups with water from the tap. Didn't bother with tea bags. Set them on a tray. I needed a reason to put myself close to that bag. I shouldered the screen door open. I came out onto the porch carrying the tray hands trembling just enough. Water lapped over the rims of the cups. "Tea," I said. "I brought tea for the nice lady." Sloane didn't even glance my way. She was deep in conversation with her followers. "And the best part is the view," she was saying. "Look at those hills. All of this is going to be ours. We are building something that lasts." I made my way across the porch. I moved toward the railing where that cream bag sat open. "Careful, Dad," Bo said sharply, not pulling his eyes from the phone. "Don't drop that." I stumbled. It was deliberate, a calculated lurch forward, my body angling toward the railing, blocking their sightline to the bag for just a heartbeat. "Whoops," I said. I caught myself against the wood. In that same instant, my hand slipped into my pocket. I palmed the device. I reached out as though steadying the bag and let the small metal disc fall into the side pocket of the cream leather lining. It settled down into the corner, tucked behind her wallet and her makeup kit. I withdrew my hand. Done. I set the tray down on the little table by the railing. "There," I said. "Tea." "Ugh," Sloane said, cutting her eyes at the cups of hot water. "What is that? That's not tea. That's just dirty water." I looked bewildered. I scratched at my head. "Nadette must have forgotten the sugar," I murmured. "She's been getting forgetful lately." Bo laughed. He pulled Sloane into his side and kissed her cheek for the camera. "You're the forgetful one, old man," he said. "Now go on inside. We've got work to do. We need to measure the perimeter for the fence." I nodded, slow and obedient. I turned and shuffled back through the door, went straight to the kitchen table, and lowered myself into a chair. I pulled out my phone and fitted the earbuds in. I opened the app that Gideon had set up for me. The audio came through clean as a bell. I could hear birds. I could hear the wind moving through the trees. Then Sloane's voice landed right in my ear, loud and sharp. "God, he smells like old soup," she said. "Did you see his fingernails?" "They were black," Bo said. "He's been digging in dirt his whole life. It doesn't wash off. But don't worry, babe. He won't be our problem much longer." "Are you sure?" Sloane asked. "I mean, genuinely sure. What if the judge turns down the order? What if he pushes back?" "He won't push back," Bo said. "He's weak. Always has been. He let people run roughshod over him his entire life. Let this whole town treat him like a criminal, even after he was cleared. He never once stood up for himself. You think I am the way I am by accident. I watched him and learned exactly what not to be. That landed. That one landed harder than any threat of a nursing home. I hadn't been weak. I'd been patient. I'd been dignified. I had swallowed my pride 1,000 different times to build a better life for that boy. And he had looked at all of it and seen weakness. "Whatever," Sloane said. "I just want him out of the picture, and I want that money, Bo. My dad is breathing down my neck. The loan sharks are calling your phone every hour. We have to move on this place fast." "We will," Bo promised. "The moment he's locked away, we've got power of attorney over everything. We sell the surface rights to your dad's company. We pull out his pension. We empty the savings. It'll be enough to cover the interest on the debts for a few months until the lithium deal closes." I stopped. I pressed the earbud harder into my ear. Lithium? I hadn't heard anything about lithium. Gideon hadn't said a word about lithium. "What lithium deal?" Sloane asked, her voice dropping a notch. "Didn't mention it," Bo said, and I could hear the smugness sitting in his voice like grease. "About a month back, I had a geologist buddy come out here. Said he was looking for water. He pulled core samples up from the North Ridge." And Sloane asked, "And this dirt isn't just good for cotton," Bo said. "There is a massive lithium deposit sitting under the North Ridge. We're talking millions, Sloane, tens of millions. That's the real reason I need the farm. The golf course is just something to show your dad's investors. What's underneath that ground is where the money lives." My heart seized. Then it started up again, slow and heavy like a drum beaten underwater. They weren't stealing the farm for a golf course. They knew there was a fortune buried in the soil. A fortune Bo was certain he was about to take from me. But he had made a mistake, one so large it was going to swallow him whole. He believed that owning the land meant owning everything beneath it. He knew nothing about Black Soil Minerals LLC. He had no idea that 5 years ago, I had separated the surface rights from the mineral rights entirely. He didn't know that the lithium he was already spending in his head had nothing to do with the farm anymore. It belonged to the trust, and the trustee of that trust was me. I pulled the earbuds out. I sat in the quiet of my kitchen. A slow smile moved across my face. It wasn't a gentle smile. It was the smile of a man who turns over his cards to reveal a royal flush, while the other fellow has been pushing all his chips in on a pair of twos. "You want to dig, son?" I whispered to the empty room. "Go right ahead. You're only digging yourself deeper." Later, I sat in my dark living room, with only the moonlight laying itself across the floorboards in long, pale strips. The house had gone quiet around me, but inside my head, there was nothing but noise. I adjusted the volume on my phone and settled the earbud back into place. The feed from the device I dropped into Sloane's bag was crisp and clear. In the background, I could hear silverware against plates, the low murmur of a restaurant. They were out celebrating the unraveling of my life. "We need to nail down the facility details tonight," Sloane said. Her voice was clipped and businesslike. "I called Morningfield Senior Living this afternoon. Do you know what they want for a semi-private room? $5,000 a month, Bo. $5,000? That's $60,000 a year." "It's a nice place, though," Bo said. His voice was muffled like he was talking around a mouthful of food. "They've got a garden, activities. It's dignified." "Dignified doesn't make the mortgage payment," Sloane snapped. "We can't afford dignified. We are hemorrhaging money. Every dollar we wring out of that farm needs to go to my dad's creditors or your bookie. We cannot throw $5,000 a month at an old man who thinks his dead wife is out making peach cobbler." A pause, the sound of something being poured into a glass. "So, what are you suggesting?" Bo asked. "I found another option," Sloane said. "The East Ward State Facility." A cold hand closed around my heart. The East Ward facility had a reputation everyone in the county knew about. It was a warehouse for people the world had stopped caring about: the indigent, the burned out, the elderly, with no one left in their corner. Concrete floors, the smell of urine baked into the walls, a place where you went to disappear. "Oh, Sloane, that place is a hellhole," Bo said, and for just a moment his voice faltered. "It's full of criminals and homeless folks. They keep the patients sedated just to manage them. Dad may be slipping, but he's not an animal." "He's a liability," Sloane said, her voice low and precise as a scalpel. "And right now, a very costly one. The state facility is free, Bo. $0. That's $60,000 a year we keep in our pocket. Do you want to protect your father's dignity, or do you want to save yourself? Because if those payments don't go through next week, you are the one sleeping on the street." The silence that came after was thick enough to press on your chest. I held my breath. I waited for my son to draw a line. I waited for him to say there were things he would not do, that casting his father into a pit was a price he wasn't willing to pay no matter what. "Fine," Bo said, barely above a whisper. "Do it. Put him in the state home. Just make sure the paperwork says he's a danger to himself, so they take him right away." I closed my eyes. One tear cut a slow path through the dust on my cheek. He'd done it. He had traded me away not just for money, but for convenience. He'd agreed to erase me from the earth to save himself a few $1,000s a month. The last thread of anything connecting us had just broken clean. I pulled the earbud out. I'd heard enough. I knew what needed doing. Sleep never came. I sat in my chair and watched daylight crawl up over fields that no longer carried my name on the deed. When the first light caught the barn roof, I got to my feet. I splashed cold water on my face. I laced up my work boots. I did not reach for a suit. I put on my faded denim overalls and my flannel shirt. I wanted them to see the farmer when he walked through the door. I drove my beat-up pickup into the city. The suspension groaned and the engine knocked the whole way, but it got me there. I pulled up in front of Cornerstone City Bank, that glass tower that stands over downtown, like it owns everything beneath it. It was the bank that held the debt on half the businesses in the state. I walked into the lobby. My boots rang off the marble floors. A security guard moved toward me, his hand drifting near his belt, taking in my dirty clothes. A young teller watched me with equal parts pity and irritation. They saw a worn-out old man looking for a loan modification or a handout. I walked right past them to the elevator. "Sir, you cannot go up there," the guard called after me. "Executive offices are by appointment only." "I have an appointment," I said, and kept moving. I pressed the button for the top floor. When the doors slid open, I walked to the corner office. The secretary looked up, caught off guard. But before she could get a word out, the inner office door opened. Mr. Greer, the bank president, stepped into the doorway. He was a man who understood the worth of everything secrets included. He knew about the lithium. He knew about the trust. He knew that the man standing in his lobby in a pair of overalls was, technically speaking, one of his most significant depositors. "Harlow," he said, smiling and reaching out his hand. "Come in." Coffee." "Black," I said. We settled into his office with the city spread out below us. I didn't bother with pleasantries. "I want to talk about the Whitleys," I said. Greer let out a long breath. He took his glasses off and pressed his fingers to the bridge of his nose. "Prescott Whitley," he said. "That name gives me a headache, Harlow. We've been trying to restructure his debt for months now. He owes us $15 million. Every asset he has is leveraged to the ceiling. The only reason we haven't moved to foreclose is that he keeps dangling a big capital infusion from some new development deal." "The golf course," I said. "Yes," Greer said. "He claims he's locked up prime acreage and solid investors." "He hasn't," I said. "The land is contested and his investor is my son, who has no money." Greer studied me, his eyes going narrow. "So, the deal is dead," he said. "It was never breathing," I said. "Prescott is going under Greer, and I want to be the one who hands him the anchor." "What exactly are you proposing?" Greer asked. "I want to buy the debt," I said. "All of it, the full $15 million note." Greer laughed one short, sharp sound. "And Harlow, that is a significant sum, even for the trust." "I have the authorization," I said, and laid a folder on his desk. "Black Soil Minerals, LLC has the liquidity. We'll purchase the non-performing loan at 60 cents on the dollar. You walk away with $9 million in cash today and a toxic asset off your books. I get the paper." Greer looked over the documents. He ran the numbers in his head. He knew the Whitley loan was worthless. $9 million for it was a gift from God. "Why Harlow?" he asked. "Why get involved with him?" "I'm not bailing him out," I said, my voice flat and cold. "I'm buying the right to foreclose. I want to own him, Greer. I want to own his house. I want to own his cars. I want to own the shirt on his back. When that note comes due, I want to be the man holding the pen." Greer looked at me differently then. It was the kind of respect a man gives when he recognizes that the person across the desk walked in carrying something dangerous. He reached for his intercom. "Bring me the Vanderbilt file," he said, "and get legal in here. We're closing a deal." An hour later, I walked out of that bank. No briefcase, just a single fat envelope tucked into the front pocket of my overalls. The sun was high, and the city hummed all around me, people rushing to work, chasing money, chasing standing. Not one of them gave the old man in the dirty work clothes a second look. Not one of them knew he'd just bought one of the oldest family dynasties in the city. I climbed back into the truck. I set the envelope on the passenger seat beside my hat. It didn't look like much, just a sheaf of paper, but it was a weapon, a live charge waiting on the right moment to go off. I picked up my phone and typed a message to Gideon. "The Eagle has landed. I have the paper. Keep it quiet. I want to see Prescott's face when I lay it on the table." Gideon's reply came back before I'd set the phone down. "You are a dangerous man, Harlow. They are expecting a lamb, and you are bringing a lion." I turned the key. The engine roared. I drove back toward the farm, back toward the wedding, back toward the snare I had spent months building. I was no longer just the father they were trying to throw away. I was no longer just the obstacle standing between them and their golf course. I was the landlord. I was the bank. I was the judge and the jury both. And the trial was about to open. The Tidewater Grand Resort was the kind of place designed to make poor men feel invisible and wealthy men feel like royalty. It perched on a cliff above the water, a wide, sprawling palace of white marble and gold leaf that cost more per night than I cleared in a good harvest year. I parked my rusted truck between a Bentley and a Ferrari. The valet stared at me as though I'd pulled up in a mule cart. I stepped out and smoothed the front of my navy suit, the one I'd bought 10 years ago for my wife Nadette's funeral. It carried the smell of cedar chips and old grief, but it was the only armor I owned. Inside the ballroom, it looked like something conjured from a fever dream. Towers of champagne flutes stacked 6 feet high caught fire under the crystal chandeliers. Long banquet tables buckled under ice sculptures and platters of lobster and bowls of black caviar that gleamed like wet gravel. The air was dense with expensive perfume and the sound of a string quartet playing something that felt like money itself, set to music. At the center of it all stood Beau. My son looked like someone I'd never met. He was holding court near the bar, ringed by young men in tuxedos who laughed too loud and drank too fast. Beau's face was flushed and slick with sweat and self-satisfaction. He was waving a crystal flute around as he talked wine sloshing onto the floor like it cost nothing. I closed the deal just this morning. Bo was shouting over the music. 500 acres of prime real estate, boys. We break ground on the golf course next month. It is going to be the premier club in the entire South. One of his friends clapped him hard on the back. That's big time, Bo. What are you doing with the commission? Bo flashed a wide, feverish grin. I'm looking at a yacht, he said. A 50-foot sailboat. I'm going to dock her right down there in the marina. We are going to live like kings. I stood in the doorway and watched him. He was spending money he didn't have on a future that would never arrive. He was selling a farm that wasn't his. He looked at that room, the way a starving wolf looks at a carcass. But he didn't know the meat was poisoned. I drew a breath and stepped into the light. The moment I crossed that threshold, something shifted in the room. Heads turned, eyes narrowed, whispers started behind hands heavy with diamonds. Who is that? Is that the help? Why is he wearing that old suit? I kept walking, boots clicking hard against the marble floor. I hadn't come to make a scene, not yet. I was there to bear witness to what was coming. But I hadn't made it 10 feet into the room before a wall of white silk stepped directly into my path. It was Sloane. She looked like a queen in her gown, but her eyes were cold and hard as river stone. She put one hand flat against my chest and stopped me cold. What do you think you're doing? She hissed, her voice low and sharp as a blade. I'm coming to my son's wedding, I said calmly. Not looking like that, you're not, she snapped. She looked me over slowly, her nose pulling tight with contempt. You look like a gravedigger Harlow. This is a black tie event. That suit is an embarrassment and you are ruining my aesthetic. She pulled out her phone and checked the screen. Before I tell you what I walked into that morning and what it would finally cost, the people who believed they had already won, let me ask you this. If you had spent years quietly preparing for a betrayal you always knew was coming, would you meet it with anger or would you let the trap close on its own? I have a live stream scheduled in 10 minutes, she said. I've got 50,000 followers waiting to see the entrance. You cannot be standing in the background. You look poor. You look dirty. You will ruin the frame. I looked at her. She was worried about a phone video, while her entire life was built on a foundation of lies. So where would you like me to go? I asked. Sloane aimed a manicured finger toward the far end of the ballroom, near the swinging doors that led to the kitchen. There was a small round table tucked back in the shadows, half hidden behind a tall potted palm. It was where the vendors sat. The photographer's assistant was there. The limo driver was there. Sit over there, she ordered. Out of sight. Don't move. Don't speak to any of the guests. And for the love of God, don't try to hug me. I made my way to that corner table. I settled in beside the limo driver, a heavy-set man who looked like his collar was about 2 sizes too tight. He gave me a nod. I nodded back. I felt more at home with him than I would have at the head table with anyone in a tuxedo. I watched from the shadows as the party churned on around me. It was excess on full display. Waiters moved through the crowd carrying trays of food that cost more than I spent on groceries for a month. People raised glasses and toasted the happy couple, not one of them knowing the floor beneath this whole evening was already giving way. A few minutes passed before Bo broke free from his circle of admirers and made his way toward my table. He didn't look pleased to find me there. He looked irritated the way you look at a spot on your shirt you just noticed before an important meeting. He didn't sit. He stood over me, rocking slightly on his heels. You made it, he said. His voice had the thick, rounded edges of too much drink. I told you I would stay, I said. I keep my word. Good, Bo said. He reached into his pocket and came out with a money clip. He peeled off a crisp $50 bill and snapped it down onto the tablecloth in front of me, right next to the bread plate. What's this? I asked, looking at it. Cab fare, Bo said. And a tip. Look, Dad, I know you don't belong here. These aren't your kind of people. You're probably miserable. So do us both a favor, eat something, have a drink, and then head on out. Leave, I repeated. Yeah, leave, Bo said. Go home. Don't hang around for the cake. Don't wait on the speeches. Just slip out the back and don't bother us on our wedding night. We've got important people to impress tonight, and you are dragging the energy down. He looked at me with that particular mixed pity sitting on top of contempt. Take the money, Dad. Go buy yourself something. Maybe a new shirt. Then he turned and walked back toward the light, back to the applause, back to the lie. I looked at the bill on the white tablecloth. My son had just tried to buy me off. He had put a price on his own father's presents at his wedding and landed on $50. I didn't touch the money. I left it sitting right there. I picked up a piece of chicken from my plate and took a bite. It was dry. I chewed it slow. I wasn't going anywhere. I was going to sit in that corner until the very last note played. I wanted to see his face when the music stopped for good. At the head table, Prescott Whitley was in his element. Big rolling laughs, hand landing on shoulders, acting like a man who owned the room and everything in it. He had a glass of scotch in one hand and his phone face up on the table in front of him. Then the phone buzzed. I saw it vibrate against the wood. Prescott glanced at it. He frowned. He let it go. It buzzed again and again, a hard, insistent pulse that didn't quit. He finally picked it up. He looked at the screen and his face changed in an instant. Whatever color the scotch had put in his cheeks drained straight out of him. He shoved back from the table, knocking his chair behind him, pressed the phone to his ear, and moved off toward a quieter spot near the windows. I watched him from across the room. I knew exactly who was on that call. The bank, the creditors, the first stone of the avalanche. Prescott was gesticulating now, his free hand cutting the air. He was shouting, though the music swallowed his words. He looked like a man trying to plug a dam with his fists. He ended the call and immediately started another. He paced. He waited. He yelled again. Then a phone rang at the table, not his. It was the phone of the man seated beside Lorinda Whitley, a construction magnate named Farnley. Farnley read whatever was on his screen, and his face went to stone. He looked at Prescott. He looked at Bo. Then he stood up without a word to Lorinda and walked out of the room. Then another phone went off. And another. It moved through the room like a current bad news jumping from table to table, investor to investor, partner to partner. The men who had pledged millions to Prescott Whitley were all receiving the same message. Collateral disputed, assets frozen, contracts void. A waiter appeared at Prescott's side, holding a wireless payment terminal. He leaned in and said something quiet. Prescott waved him off angrily and pointed toward Bo. The waiter crossed the room to Bo, who laughed and made a show of producing his black credit card. He swiped it with a little flourish. The waiter looked at the machine. He shook his head and said something low. Bo's expression flickered. He swiped it again harder. The machine beeped a flat dead sound. Rejected. Bo pulled out another card and handed it across. Beep. Rejected. I sat in my corner and took a slow sip of water. Cool and clean. The music was still going, but something in the room had shifted like a barometric change before a storm. The laughter was thinning out. Guests were drifting to their phones. Whispers were moving between tables. Eyes kept pulling toward Prescott and Bo with a new uneasy look in them. Prescott crossed the floor in long strides and grabbed Bo by the arm the same way Bo had grabbed me not long before. He put his mouth close to Bo's ear and said something that stripped the color right out of Bo's face. Bo looked startled. Then he looked afraid. His eyes began to sweep the room wide and hunting for a way out for someone to blame. His gaze moved through the crowd and found me sitting in my corner. I lifted my glass of water in a quiet toast. The house of cards was coming down, and gravity has never once shown mercy. The string quartet was still playing a waltz, but the feeling in the room was no longer a waltz. It was something jagged and lurching. I watched from my table as a man in a dark suit moved onto the floor with the purposeful stride of someone who has unpleasant business to conduct. He was not a guest. He was the resort manager. I could read his name tag from where I sat. Mr. Hargrove. He didn't spare a glance for the flowers or the ice sculptures. His eyes went straight to Bo. Bo was laughing at something one of his friends had said, holding his empty glass out for a refill that wasn't coming. When Mr. Hargrove tapped him on the shoulder, Bo spun around with the look of a man who has just been interrupted by someone far beneath him. "Excuse me, sir," Mr. Hargrove said. His voice was quiet, but it had an edge that cut right through the noise. "We have a problem with the billing. The pre-authorization on the card we have on file has been voided by the issuing bank." Bo let out a long theatrical sigh and rolled his eyes for the benefit of the nearby tables. "Voided," he repeated loud enough that people around him could hear. "It's probably just a fraud alert. I've been making some large purchases today, you know how it is. Big transactions trip the security protocols." He reached into his tuxedo jacket and produced a sleek black metal card, the heavy kind, the kind that's meant to signal that doors don't close for you. He held it out between two fingers without even looking at the man. "Just run this one," Bo said, "and send another bottle of Dom to the table. This is tedious." Mr. Hargrove took the card. He didn't walk away to a register. He pulled a wireless terminal from his jacket pocket and inserted the card right there in front of the room. The screen lit up blue. Bo smirked over at Sloane, who watched with a vaguely bored expression. Then the machine beeped. A hard, flat tone. Transaction declined. Mr. Hargrove looked at the screen. Then he looked at Bo. "I'm sorry, sir. This card has been declined." Bo's laugh had a brittle edge now. "That's impossible," he snapped. "Run it again. You probably put the chip in wrong." Mr. Hargrove ran it again. Beep. Declined. "Try the magnetic strip," Bo said, his voice climbing. "The chip is probably faulty." Mr. Hargrove swiped the card. Beep. Declined. The quiet spreading through the tables nearest the head table was getting louder by the second. It was moving outward the way ripples do, when you drop a stone, steady, unstoppable, reaching further with every second. The guests nearest the head table set down their forks. They turned in their chairs. Nothing draws the attention of wealthy people quite like the scent of someone else's ruin. Bo's face went a deep, ugly shade of red. He snatched the card back and stuffed it into his pocket. He dug out a platinum card, then a gold one. "Try these," he said, and threw them both onto the tablecloth. Mr. Hargrove picked up the platinum card. Beep. Declined. He picked up the gold. Beep. Declined. "Sir, Mr. Hargrove," said his voice, keeping its professional flatness. "The system is flagging these accounts as frozen, not over limit." Frozen. That typically indicates a seizure order or a full asset lockdown. "We require the second installment of $250,000 immediately. If payment cannot be rendered, we will need to pause service and ask the guests to vacate the premises." "Vacate!" Sloane shrieked. She came out of her chair so fast it toppled behind her. "You cannot throw us out. This is my wedding. Do you have any idea how many people are watching this right now?" She grabbed her purse, the cream Bottega Veneta bag where I had planted the device. She tore through it and came out with a silver card. "Use mine," she snapped. "My father gave me this for emergencies, and incompetent staff is absolutely an emergency." Mr. Hargrove took her card. The whole room held its breath. Beep. Declined. Sloane stared at the little machine like it had said something unforgivable. "No," she whispered. "That card has no limit. It's linked to the family trust." The family trust that the bank was currently in the process of consuming, I thought. The trust built on borrowed money and fabricated worth. Then Prescott Whitley got to his feet. The patriarch, the man who had threatened to burn my house to the ground. He brought his fist down on the table and sent the silverware jumping. His face had gone the color of a bruise. "Enough of this nonsense," Prescott bellowed. He came around the table and drew himself up over the manager. "Who do you think you are? Do you know who I am? I am Prescott Whitley. I own half this state. I could buy this hotel and have you fired just for the entertainment of it." Mr. Hargrove didn't flinch. He didn't give a single inch. He glanced down at the tablet in his other hand, scrolled once, and raised his eyes to meet Prescott's. "I know exactly who you are, sir," Mr. Hargrove said. "You are Prescott Whitley, and according to the notification we received from Cornerstone City Bank 10 minutes ago, you are currently in default on loans totaling $15 million. Your assets have been frozen by court order, pending a foreclosure audit." The words settled over the room like ash. $15 million. Frozen. Foreclosure. The guests gasped one collective sound, a sudden pulling in of breath that seemed to empty the air out of the ballroom. Whispers erupted into open talk. "Did you hear that? Bankrupt? Foreclosure." I knew they were stretched too thin. Prescott stumbled backward. It was the first time in my life I had ever watched that man look small. He turned to Lorinda, who was clutching her pearls with both hands, her eyes darting toward the nearest exit. "That is a lie," Prescott said, but the force behind it had already collapsed. He looked at his phone buzzing again on the table. He didn't pick it up. He knew who it was. Bo looked at Prescott. He looked at the rejected cards strewn across the white tablecloth. He watched the waiters beginning to lift plates of untouched lobster from the tables. Then his eyes found me, wide, bloodshot. The panic behind them was curdling into rage. He needed somewhere to put it. He needed a target to absorb the blame for the fact that the whole glittering dream was dissolving around him. And in his mind, there was only one possible explanation. Only one person who could have done this. He moved toward me, not a walk, a storm. He knocked a chair sideways. He shoved a waiter out of his path and sent a full tray of champagne flutes shattering against the marble floor. The crash of breaking glass cut through every conversation in the room at once. Every eye turned. They watched the groom in his perfect tuxedo bearing down on the old man sitting quietly in the corner. Bo reached my table and didn't slow down. He grabbed the lapels of my old suit and dragged me up out of my chair. He was strong. Rage and humiliation together make a man strong. "What did you do?" he screamed into my face. His spit landed on my cheek. "What did you do, old man? You called the bank, didn't you? You revoked the power of attorney." I didn't fight him. I let him hold me up. I let everyone in that room see him shaking his own father by the collar. I let them see exactly what lived inside him. "I didn't revoke anything, son," I said. My voice was quiet, but in the silence of that ballroom, it carried to every corner. "I signed the paper. You have the paper." "Then why is the collateral frozen?" Bo shouted. "The bank said the land is in dispute. Why is it in dispute if you signed the rights over to me?" He shook me again. My head snapped back. "Tell me," he roared, "or I swear to God I will finish what we started on the mountain." He caught himself. He understood what he'd just said out loud. The guests didn't know what the mountain meant, but they heard the threat. They saw the wildness in him. I reached up, and one hand at a time, peeled his fingers from my jacket. I smoothed the fabric down. I picked up my napkin and wiped my face. "I didn't revoke the power, Bo," I said. "But in your rush to sell the farm this morning, you failed to read the deed history. You skipped your due diligence." "What history?" Bo demanded, his chest still heaving. "The Ancestral Preservation Act of 1922. I said it was a beautiful lie, clean, plausible, and invented whole cloth. But Bo had never been a student of history. He had only ever studied greed. "What are you talking about?" he said. "The South pasture," I said. "The one your bulldozers tore into this morning, the one where your mother is buried. That land was designated as a historical family burial ground by your grandfather. Under state law, no commercial development is permitted on land carrying a historical preservation designation. When you sent those machines in this morning, you triggered a mandatory federal freeze on the title." I took one step toward him. "You tried to dig up your mother, Bo, and the law stopped you. No bank in this country will lend against a property under federal investigation for the desecration of a historical site. You froze your own assets the moment that blade broke the ground." Bo's mouth fell open. Nothing came out. He turned to Prescott. Prescott looked like a man who had just been told the building was on fire. "You dug up a graveyard!" Prescott shouted. "You idiot! You told me the title was clean." "I didn't know," Bo stammered, backing away from me. "He never told me." "You never asked," I said. "You were too busy trying to bury me to check whether the ground was sacred." None of it was true. There was no act of 1922. The real reason the assets were frozen was that I had purchased the debt and filed a lien through the LLC. But this story, a son's naked greed violating the ground where his mother lay, was a far more devastating thing to say in front of this particular audience. It made him not merely a failure, it made him a monster. The room turned on him. I could feel it happen the way you feel the temperature drop before a storm. The sympathy for a groom in distress evaporated. They were no longer looking at a victim of banking complications. They were looking at a man who would bulldoze a cemetery to build a golf course. I turned to Mr. Hargrove. "Sir," I said, "I believe my son is unable to pay for this evening." Mr. Hargrove gave a single nod. "If that is the case," I said, "I suggest you lock the doors, because I doubt they have enough gas in their cars to get home." Bo looked at me with a hatred so pure it had no temperature. "You ruined everything," he whispered. "No, son," I said. "I just turned on the lights. You're the one who's ugly." The news tore through that ballroom faster than a brush fire moves through dry grass in August. It started as a whisper near the bar and became a roar within seconds. The guests at the Tidewater Grand Resort didn't need any formal announcement to understand the ship was going under. They had seen the declined cards. They had watched the manager's face. They had read Prescott Whitley's eyes. Wealthy people carry a survival instinct, honed sharper than any blade. They understand that failure spreads like infection, that being publicly linked to a bankrupt man is its own kind of social death. The exodus began. It was not a graceful departure. It was a scramble. Men closed hands around their wives' elbows and steered them toward the exits, without looking back toward the head table. Half-eaten lobster was abandoned where it sat. Full champagne glasses were left standing. Even the wedding cake, a white tower rising from the center of the room, was deserted. The ballroom emptied with a speed that was almost breathtaking, leaving behind only the silence where the string quartet had been playing minutes before. Sloane stood alone in the middle of the dance floor. Her wedding dress, $12,000 of white silk and illusion, hung on her like a shroud. Her mascara had tracked down both cheeks in long black rivers, turning her face into something out of a tragedy. She wasn't the ice queen anymore. She was a child whose birthday cake had been snatched away. She stared at the vacant tables. Then she turned to Beau. "You lied to me," she screamed. Her voice fractured into a sob. "You said you were wealthy. You told me that farm was worth millions. You promised you could cover all of this." Beau tried to move toward her, palms raised in surrender. "Babe, listen," he pleaded. "It's just a banking error. We can sort this out." "Don't you touch me," she shrieked, stumbling backward. "You are a fraud, Beau Kane. You're nothing but a broke country boy playing dress-up. You destroyed my wedding. You destroyed my reputation." She yanked the veil from her hair and hurled it to the floor, grinding the delicate lace beneath her heel. "I hate you," she screamed. "I hate you and your filthy father and your worthless dirt farm." She fled the room, her sobs bouncing off the marble walls. Beau stood watching her go, his shoulders caved. He surveyed the empty ballroom. His friends had vanished. His investors had vanished. Even the limo driver had crept out the back. He was utterly alone in the rubble of his own arrogance. Prescott Whitley was not crying. He was smoldering. He watched his empire collapse in real time, and he needed someone to punish. He needed a target for the fury churning inside him. His gaze swept the room and settled on me. I was still holding my place in the shadows, napkin in hand, watching the catastrophe unfold with a stillness that must have set him ablaze. He bore down across the room, a large man accustomed to wielding his size as a weapon. He moved like a bull, sending a chair spinning out of his path. He pinned me against the wall near the kitchen doors. His face was inches from mine, red slick with sweat. He smelled of sour whiskey and dread. "You think this is funny, Harlow?" he growled. "You think you can run games on me?" I didn't flinch. I held his gaze. "I am not playing Prescott," I said. "I will sue you," he bellowed, driving his palm against the wall beside my head. "I will sue you for slander. I will sue you for tortious interference. I will sue you for fraud. Every connection I have in this state will be aimed at burying you. I have judges in my pocket, Harlow. I have senators on speed dial. I will make certain you die in a prison cell for tampering with my credit." He jabbed a thick finger into my chest. "You picked the wrong family dirt farmer. Come morning, you won't own the shirt on your back. I will take your land. I will take your truck. I will dig up your wife's bones just to see you suffer." I caught his finger, not hard enough to snap it, but firm enough to mean it. I guided it away from my chest. I straightened to my full height. I let every inch of it fill that space. I was no longer just a farmer. I was the storm he had dismissed. "You ought to check your phone, Prescott," I said. My voice came out low and steady, slicing clean through his bluster. What he spat, jerking to free his hand. "Check your email," I said, specifically the one from Black Soil Minerals, LLC. It should have landed about 2 minutes ago. Prescott stared at me. Confusion flickered across his face. Why would a dirt farmer know anything about his email? Why would I know the name of a company he'd never come across? "Check it," I said again. "Unless you'd prefer the sheriff to evict you in front of your neighbors tomorrow morning." Prescott fished his phone from his jacket pocket. His hands were trembling so badly he nearly dropped it. He unlocked the screen. He pulled up his email. I watched his eyes move across the message. I knew every word it contained. It was a formal notice of default and immediate foreclosure on his primary residence, his vacation home, and his commercial properties, citing the purchase of his debt by Black Soil Minerals, LLC, and the activation of the immediate repayment clause on grounds of insolvency. The color left his face, like watching a fire go out. He cycled from purple to gray to a ghastly white. His mouth fell open and nothing came. He looked up at me, eyes stretched wide with terror. The arrogance had dissolved, replaced by the raw panic of a man who feels the trapdoor give beneath his feet. "Black soil," he whispered. "Who is Black Soil?" He clutched my lapels. "Who are they, Harlow?" He screamed. "How do they hold my notes? How did they acquire my debt?" I smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of the earth waiting to take back what belongs to it. The smile of a man who had spent 40 years waiting on justice. I eased his hands off my jacket. I smoothed the fabric. I straightened my hat. I gave him no answer. I didn't need to. The answer was right there in front of him, but he was too blind to recognize it. He could not conceive that the man he called Stinky was the man who now held the deed to his life. I turned and walked toward the exit. "Who is it?" Prescott screamed at my back. "Who owns me?" I kept walking. The sound of his panic was the finest wedding music I could have wished for. I moved past the empty tables, past Beau, who had sunk to the floor with his face buried in his hands, past the banquet manager, who gave me a slow nod of respect, out into the cool night air, leaving the wreckage of their pride behind me. The game was finished. Now the harvest began. The moon hung high and bright above the Georgia fields, throwing light across the torn-up south pasture where the bulldozers had gone silent. I sat in my old rocking chair in the center of the living room. The lights were out. The only glow came from the restless blue flicker of the television set in the corner. Across my lap lay my 12-gauge shotgun. It wasn't loaded. I had no intention of shooting my own blood, but a man does not sit still for a pack of rabid wolves without something solid in his hands. I heard them before I saw them. The roar of engines coming up the driveway was nothing like the steady hum of farm machinery. It was the hard, aggressive revving of engines run flat out. Tires screamed as they locked up in the gravel, spraying stones against the house siding. Car doors crashed open. Voices tore through the night. They sounded like a mob. Then came breaking glass. A rock punched through the front window, shattering the pane and scattering shards across the hardwood floor. A heavy boot followed, slamming into the front door. The wood burst apart around the lock. The door swung wide and cracked against the wall. Beau came in first. He was not the polished groom from the ballroom. His jacket was gone. His shirt was torn and dark with sweat and wine. He had a wooden baseball bat gripped in one hand. His eyes were wild, rolling like a horse trapped inside a burning barn. Behind him came Prescott and Lorinda Whitley, looking like survivors pulled from a wreck. Lorinda was missing one shoe, limping and weeping. Prescott's face was a mask of purple rage, his expensive tie hanging loose, his hair standing up in tufts. Anne last Sloane. She was trembling, her white dress ruined with mud and grass stains. Her makeup smeared into dark streaking lines down her cheeks. They flooded my small living room with their noise and their smell. The smell of fear, of liquor, of desperate entitlement. "There he is!" Beau screamed, hoisting the bat. He leveled it at me. "You ruined my life. You ruined everything." Prescott shoved past him, fists clenched at his sides. "Undo it," he roared. "Get on that phone right now. Tell them it was a mistake. Tell them you fabricated the debt. Tell them black soil is a fraud, or I swear I will pull this house apart board by board with my bare hands." I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I kept my hands resting easy on the cold steel of the shotgun barrel. I looked at them without hurry. I looked at the bat in my son's hand. I looked at the hatred burning in his eyes. He was ready to do damage. He was ready to beat his own father bloody to salvage his reputation. "You are trespassing," I said. My voice was quiet, but it reached every corner of the room. Trespassing. Beau laughed, a high, unraveling sound. "This is my house, old man. I have the paperwork. I have the power of attorney. You're the squatter here, and I am throwing you out." He moved a step closer, bat raised higher. "Fix this, Dad," he hissed. "Hey, fix it now, or I will break every bone you've got. I have nothing left to lose. They took my car. They froze my accounts. My friends walked out and left me standing at the altar. You humiliated me. Now you're going to answer for it." Sloane was shrieking from the doorway. "Make him fix it, Beau. Make him hand over the money. He has to have money if he bought the debt. Beat it out of him if that's what it takes." It was a scene straight out of hell. My family, my blood, my legacy, standing in my living room, howling for it. They had come apart completely. Greed had scraped away everything human in them, leaving nothing but raw, clawing instinct. I slowly raised one hand from the gun. Beau recoiled, thinking I was bringing it to bear, but I didn't. I pointed one calloused finger toward the far corner of the room, toward the television set. "Look," I said. Beau blinked. He looked lost. The bat didn't come down. What he asked. "Look at the TV," I said. The volume was low, but you could still make out the words. It was the local news out of Macon. The screen carried a breaking news banner, blazing in red. The anchor, a woman with grave, steady eyes, was speaking with urgency. Behind her hung a graphic, a county map, a red star planted directly over my farm. Beau turned his head slowly. Prescott stopped shouting. They all looked at the screen. I reached for the remote on the side table and brought the volume up. Breaking news tonight, the anchor said. A sweeping geological discovery in central Georgia has economists and technology giants taking notice. A survey team commissioned by Black Soil Minerals has confirmed the presence of one of the largest lithium deposits on the North American continent. The deposit, situated beneath the Kane Farm in Loran County, is estimated to carry a value upward of $500 million. The room went dead quiet. Nothing but the hum of the television and the ragged breathing of the people standing in my living room. Lithium, a key component in electric vehicle batteries, has been called white gold, the anchor went on. This discovery could remake the economic landscape of the entire state. Analysts say the holder of the mineral rights stands to become one of the most powerful financial entities in the region. The value of that land alone has vaulted overnight. $500 million. The words hung in the air, heavy, sweet, suffocating. I watched their faces. It was like watching a front move through in fast motion. The fury drained away. The desperation folded in on itself. What filled the space was something far more frightening. Hunger. Bo stared at the screen. His mouth came open. The baseball bat slid from his grip. It struck the floor with a hard wooden clatter, but he never even glanced down at it. He looked at the county map on the screen. Then he looked at the floorboards under his feet. Then he looked at me. $500 million, he whispered. Prescott Whitley lurched forward. He had the look of a man whose knees were about to give out. He caught the back of a chair to hold himself upright. "Is that true?" he wheezed. "Is that actually real?" "It's real," I said quietly. "The survey wrapped up yesterday." Bo dropped to his knees. Not from grief. From the sheer tonnage of the greed that crashed down on him all at once. He crawled toward me across the dusty rug. His eyes were wide and blazing, a feverish light burning behind them. "Dad," he choked out. "Dad, you hear that?" I looked down at him. I looked at the son who had been threatening to shatter my bones not 2 minutes before. "I heard it," I said. "We're rich," Bo said. A laugh came up out of him, wet and manic, like something broken. "We're rich, Dad. We're not broke. We're not anything close to broke. $500 million. My God, we own all of it." He reached up and seized my knee. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. "I knew it," he rambled. "I knew this land held something. I told everyone. Remember, Dad, I told you we shouldn't sell. I said we had to keep it in the family. We did it, Dad. We won." He was rewriting every hour of the past day as he spoke. Bulldozers gone. The nursing home scheme. Gone. The bat he'd just dropped on my floor, wiped clean from the record. Then Sloane moved. She elbowed Prescott aside and ran across the room, throwing herself down at my feet beside Bo. She shoved him out of the way in her scramble to reach me, nearly knocking him flat. She locked her arms around my muddy boots. She pressed her face hard against the denim of my overalls. "Daddy," she sobbed. "Oh, Daddy, I'm so sorry." She tilted her face up at me. Her mascara-streaked features were twisted into a grotesque imitation of tenderness. "I was just so overwhelmed," she wept. "The wedding, the pressure, all of it. I didn't mean a single word. You know I love you, don't you? You are the finest father in the world. I was only trying to look out for you. I wanted to see you safe and taken care of." She stroked my leg. Those same fingers that had held a phone up to live-stream my humiliation were now smoothing the fabric of my work clothes. "We are family," she crooned. "We stay together. We forgive each other. Don't we, Daddy? We can build the grandest house right here on this land. You can have a whole wing to yourself. Anything your heart wants. We will look after you always." I looked at them, my son and his wife, on their knees on my floor, worshiping me. Except they weren't worshiping me. They were worshiping the lithium sitting beneath my chair. They were worshiping the winning ticket they believed I had become. It was the most revolting thing I had ever laid eyes on. The violence I could stomach, the fury I could comprehend. But this instant shameless reversal, this pivot from would-be killers to groveling supplicants in the space of 30 seconds, made my skin crawl clean off my bones. It showed me the absolute void at the center of who they were. No pride, no honor, only appetite. Prescott and Lorinda were edging closer now as well. Prescott was smoothing his hair down, working to recover some shred of dignity. Lorinda wore a tight, trembling smile. "Harlow!" Prescott said, his voice rolling out with fake conviviality. "You old fox, you knew all along, didn't you? That's why you bought the debt. You were protecting the asset. Sharp. Very sharp. I've always respected a man who plays it close to the vest. He thrust out his hand. Partners, he said. I looked at his hand. I looked at Sloane wrapped around my leg. I looked at Bo weeping with relief and pressing his lips to my knuckles. I felt something building in my chest. Not happiness, something dark and bitter. Family, I said. Yes, Bo cried, gazing up with devoted eyes. Yes, Dad. Family. Us and nobody else. I reached into the front pocket of my overalls. I drew out a thick envelope. It wasn't the deed. It wasn't the debt papers. It was the folder I had lifted from Bo's desk the night of the party. The one stuffed with brochures for the state-run poorhouse. The one holding the fabricated medical history he had paid to have drawn up. I dropped the folder onto the floor between them. It fell open, scattering papers across the rug. Is this how family treats family? I asked. Bo looked down. He recognized the brochure for the East Ward Indigent Care Facility. He saw the forged physician's statement declaring me incompetent and a danger to myself. His face went the color of old ash. He looked up at me, and the devotion in his eyes flickered out. Dad, that is not what it looks like, he stammered. It looks like you were planning to lock me in a cage, I said. It looks like you paid $50,000 to a forger to have my mind erased on paper so you could walk off with my pension. I rose from the chair. I shook Sloane off my leg like she was nothing. I tightened my grip on the shotgun. Get up, I said. They scrambled away. The fear came rushing back, but it had a different flavor now. It was the fear of losing the prize. Dad, just listen. Bo pleaded, climbing to his feet with his palms out. We can explain all of it. We were in a desperate place. But that's finished now. We have the money. None of that other business needs to happen. We can bring in the finest doctors for you. Take you anywhere in the world. You'll live better than a king. I don't want to live like a king, I said. I want to live like a man whose son he can trust. And that is something I'll never have now. I nudged the baseball bat across the floor toward him. Pick it up, I said. Bo looked at the bat. What? Always pick it up, I said again. You came here tonight to beat me. You came to force my hand on the deed. You were prepared to kill me 5 minutes ago because you thought I had nothing. Now you want to smother me with kisses because you think I'm worth a fortune. I spat on the floor. At least the violence was honest, I said. This love you're showing me right now, this is filth. Bo's eyes jumped from the bat to me, to the door. He understood. The performance was finished. I wasn't going to be taken in. The desperation came roaring back. The mask of the devoted son dissolved, and what surfaced underneath was the face of an addict with nothing left to bargain with. He lunged for the bat. He snatched it up and brought it around in a hard, fast arc. Hand over the rights, he screamed, spit flying from his lips. Sign over the mineral rights. I know you've got them. Sign them over right now, or I swear I will cave your skull in and tell the law you took your own life. Sloane screamed and clawed her way backward into the corner. Prescott went rigid. I held my ground. I never lifted the shotgun. I looked straight into the barrel of my son's fury, and I saw the end of every last thing. Do it, son, I said barely above a whisper. Show me who you truly are. Bo hauled the bat back overhead, every muscle in him coiled. He was going to do it. He was going to kill his own father for a seam of rock in the ground. And then the room exploded in blue and red light. I looked at the weeping figures on my floor, and something broke loose in my throat, not a sob, but a laugh. Dry and rasping like dead corn stalks rubbing together in a winter wind. It started low in my chest and swelled until it was bouncing off the walls my father had raised, and that my son had wanted to burn to the ground. It was the laughter of a man who had peered into the abyss and found it staring back with a price tag on it. Bo's performance stopped cold. His tears shut off like a valve had been turned. He looked up at me, his face streaked with dirt and counterfeit sorrow, confusion moving across his eyes. Sloane released my leg and settled back on her heels, her mascara-wrecked eyes scanning the room, hunting for the punchline. They didn't understand. They could not grasp that I wasn't laughing with them. I was laughing at the sheer, breathtaking lunacy of their greed. You love me, I said, rolling the words around and tasting the bile they carried. You love me so completely that you were willing to wipe my mind clean to get at my money. I reached down and snatched up the packet of papers I had thrown earlier. I shook them in Bo's face, the pages rattling like dry bones. You know what this is, son? I asked, my voice hard as granite. This is not love. This is a receipt. This is an invoice for my life. I flung the papers at him a second time. They came apart in the air and drifted down, settling across his lap. Read it, I said. Read the section where you certify I am a danger to myself. Read the part where you authorize the state to medicate me until I can't recall my own name. Read the clause where you route my Social Security checks straight into your personal account. Bo stared down at the documents. He didn't read a word. He already knew every line. He had spent $50,000 to have them written. $800 a month. I said, letting that figure sit in the air between us. That is what my Social Security check amounts to. $800. You were prepared to lock me in a warehouse full of strangers. You were going to let me decay in a bed with bed sores just to pocket $800 a month toward the interest on your gambling debts. I turned to Sloan. And you, I said, you were so concerned about my health. Is that why you went looking up at the life expectancy numbers for men inside state care? I found the search history. I saw where you calculated I'd be gone inside 6 months. That was your window. 6 months to finish off a man who had done nothing but open his home to you. The room was still aside from the heavy breathing of the people who had just tried to have me killed. The mask of the loving family had peeled away entirely, and what lay beneath was something ugly and exposed. The crying had stopped. They were watching me now with the flat, cold eyes of people who had been found out. You figured I was too simple to see it, I said. You thought the country boy would be too slow to outfox the city slickers, but you forgot something. A farmer knows how to spot a snake in the grass. We know how to set a trap. Bo climbed slowly to his feet. The adoration had left his face completely. The desperation had gone with it. What replaced them was a hollow, dead stillness that reached right into my bones. He understood the charade was done. He understood that no measure of begging or weeping was going to deliver the mineral rights into his hands. He understood that I knew everything. He looked at the papers scattered on the floor. Then he looked at me. He dragged the back of his hand across his face, smearing the grime and sweat. You think you are so smart, he said quietly. His voice was different now. Not the voice of my son, the voice of someone I had never met before. You think you have won because you're holding a few pieces of paper, but you don't see it, Dad. I cannot lose. I literally cannot lose. If I walk out of here without that money, I am dead regardless. The people I owe don't file lawsuits. They break legs. They put houses to the torch. He took one step toward me. I am not going to let you destroy me, he said. I am not going to lie here and rot while you sit on top of a fortune. I didn't move. I still had the shotgun, though. I had let the barrel drift down slightly. I wanted to see where his floor was. I wanted to know if he had one. That is not your money, Bo, I said. It never was. It is my money. He roared, his face twisting into something I barely recognized. It is my inheritance, my birthright. You are just a steward, a placeholder. You were supposed to die and leave it all to me. That is the natural order of things. That is how it works. But you were too stubborn to go. He swept the room with frantic eyes, and they landed on the shotgun in my hand. Then they cut across to the corner where I stored my cleaning supplies. He spotted the box of shells sitting up on the shelf. His gaze came back to me, and I understood right then that I had made an error. I had brought a gun to this fight, but hadn't loaded it. I had used it as a prop, an emblem of authority, but symbols carry no weight with a drowning man. Bo moved, not toward me, toward the gun. He came with the explosive quickness of youth. He seized the barrel with both hands and wrenched it hard to the side. I wasn't ready for it. I was 67 years old and worn thin. He was 32 and running on pure adrenaline. The shotgun tore free of my grip. Bo stumbled back, a weapon in hand. He fumbled with the action working the slide. Click-clack. The sound cracked through the small room like a slap. He didn't know it was empty. He didn't stop to check. In his mind, he was holding a loaded gun. He raised it and aimed straight at my chest. The black mouth of that barrel looked like an eye staring down into my soul. "Sign the papers," he screamed. His hands were trembling so badly the muzzle kept wandering. "Get the deed. Get the transfer forms for the LLC. I know you have them. Sign over the mineral rights this instant, or I swear to God I will put a hole straight through you." "Bo!" Prescott shouted, pushing forward with both hands raised. "Don't be a fool. Put the gun down." "Shut up!" Bo roared, swinging the barrel toward Prescott and then back to me. "You shut up too. Every one of you is against me. You all want to see me fall, but I am not going to fall. I am going to be rich. He fixed those wild eyes on me. Do it, Dad. Sign the papers. I'll tell the police it was a suicide. I'll tell them you were destroyed after losing Mom. I'll tell them you'd lost your mind. With the medical records I had drawn up, they'll believe every word. They'll think you were a broken old man who couldn't carry the weight anymore. He was mapping out my murder again. But this time, there was nothing subtle about it. No slow poison, no manufactured accident. This was direct, brutal, the end of the road. I looked at him. I looked for the boy I had taken fishing. The boy I had put behind the wheel of my truck for the first time. The boy I had held while he cried over a scraped knee. I searched for him. He wasn't there. Only greed stood in his place, wearing his face and holding my shotgun. You'll have to shoot me, son, I said softly. Don't tempt me, Bo hissed. He drew the stock up firm against his shoulder, and his finger tightened on the trigger. I watched that knuckle go white. Sloane let out something caught between a scream and a whimper. She scrambled backward across the floor, her heels scraping hard against the wood. She looked at Bo, and for the first time since the day I met her, I saw something genuine in her eyes. Real terror. She wasn't looking at a meal ticket anymore. She was looking at a man who had come apart. Bo, she whispered. Bo, stop. This is murder. You cannot shoot him. Bo didn't look at her. His eyes never left mine. Shut up, Sloane, he said through his teeth. I am doing this for us. I am getting the money. I don't want the money if we end up behind bars, Sloane screamed. She pushed to her feet, her white dress destroyed hands shaking uncontrollably. I am not going to prison for you. I am not taking the fall as your accessory. She retreated toward the door. Where do you think you're going? Bo yelled, swinging the gun in her direction for a half second. I am leaving, Sloane cried. I am through. You are out of your mind. You have genuinely lost it. She glanced at me, and I caught the shift. The allegiance snapped. The rats were turning on one another. Mr. Kane, she said, her voice climbing high with panic. Mr. Kane, I had no part in this. I didn't know he had a gun. I had no idea he would take it this far. Please tell the police I tried to stop him. She was throwing him overboard just the same way she'd thrown me under an hour ago. She was a survivor, and survivors don't go down with a sinking ship. Bo looked at her, the betrayal written plainly across his face. You coward, he spat. You wanted that money every bit as much as I did. I wanted a golf course, Sloane screamed back. I did not sign on for a bloodbath. She wrestled with the doorknob, wrenched it open, and ran out into the dark. The sound of her feet on the gravel faded off and left us alone in the room. Bo turned back to face me. He was breathing in ragged pulls, sweat soaking through his shirt. He was alone now, genuinely alone. It is just you and me, Dad, he said. His voice was unsteady, same as it always was. He brought the gun level. Let's sign the papers, he breathed. Last chance. I looked at the barrel. I knew the gun was empty. I knew no bullet was coming, but he didn't know that. And the fact that he was willing to pull that trigger, the fact that he could contemplate ending my life for a signature, broke whatever was left intact inside me. I drew myself up. I didn't waver. I held his eyes straight on. Shoot me, I said. My voice came out like thunder. What? Bo stammered. If you are a killer, then be a killer, I said. Pull the trigger. Finish it. Show me that money is worth more to you than your own soul. Show me I failed you completely as a father. Bo stared at me. Sweat ran into his eyes. I will do it, he screamed. I will kill you. Then do it, I roared. Stop trembling and shoot. Bo squeezed his eyes shut. He let out a raw, primal cry, all frustration and greed compressed into one sound, and he pulled the trigger. Click. The firing pin falling on empty air rang out louder than any shot could have. Bo's eyes flew open. He stared at the gun. He pumped the slide. No shell came out. He pulled the trigger again. Click. He looked at me. Confusion swept across his face, and behind it came the creeping horror of understanding. It's empty, I said. Bo let the gun drop slowly. He stared at the open chamber. He stared at the man he had just tried to execute. I have never kept a loaded gun in this house, son, I said quietly. You would know that if you had ever spent any real time here instead of running from it. Bo let the shotgun fall. It hit the floor with a clatter. He sank to his knees, both hands pressed over his face. He began to sob. Not the manufactured sobs from the party. These were real. The sobs of a man who has damned himself and finally understands it. I walked over to him. I stood looking down at the top of his head. A great hollow opened up inside me. "You tried to kill me," I said. "You pulled that trigger. Dad," he wept, reaching for my leg. "I didn't know. I didn't mean it." "You meant it," I said, stepping back beyond his reach. "You meant every last bit of it. And that is something I will never be able to forgive." I turned away from him. I moved to the window. Outside, red and blue light was already pulsing against the barn wall, silent and relentless in the night. Gideon had made the call. The moment that first window shattered, Gideon had picked up the phone. "They are here," I said. "Who?" Bo asked, lifting his tear-streaked face. "The police," I said. And as if the night had been waiting for its cue, the sirens broke through, wailing like something coming to collect a debt long overdue. The strobing light swept the room in waves of red and blue, and it lit up the horror on Bo's face. He was still on his knees staring at the empty shotgun on the floor when the front door came in. Not opened. Came off what was left of its hinge, kicked through by a boot far heavier than Bo's. Gideon entered first, not in a suit. Canvas jacket, flashlight in hand, the beam cutting through the darkness like a blade. Behind him, Sheriff Brandt filled the doorway, his hand resting on his holster, 2 deputies flanking him with weapons drawn. "Drop it!" the sheriff barked, though Bo wasn't holding anything but his own face. "Hands where I can see them." Bo raised his hands slowly. They were shaking so hard I thought his wrists might give out. He looked at the deputies, then at me, then back at the deputies. He looked like a boy who had been caught playing with fire after burning the house to the ground. "It was self-defense," Bo blurted, his voice cracking wide open. "He had a gun. He threatened me." Gideon moved further into the room. He took in the shattered window. He took in the splintered door frame. He took in the baseball bat lying across the rug. Then he fixed his gaze on Bo, and the disgust in his eyes was so deep it seemed to add years to his face. "It's save it for the judge's son," Gideon said. His voice was gravel and iron. "We saw everything." "Saw what?" Bo stammered. "You just arrived." Gideon raised a finger toward the ceiling, toward the small black dome mounted in the corner above the bookshelf. "That is not a dummy camera. High-definition night vision with audio recording." "Live feed," Gideon said. "Streaming direct to the sheriff's station and my private server. We watched you break in. We watched you threaten him with the bat. We watched you pull the trigger on an unarmed man. We heard every word." Bo's face drained of color. He understood there was no story large enough to bury this. The world had watched him try to murder his father. Prescott Whitley tried to melt into the background, edging toward the shadows near the kitchen, but a deputy caught the movement. "Stay right there," the deputy ordered. "I didn't do a thing," Prescott yelled, hoisting his hands. "I came here to mediate." I tried to pull him back. "We heard you too, Prescott," Gideon said, putting the flashlight beam square in his face. "We heard you demand he sign the papers. We heard you threaten to tear the house apart board by board. That is conspiracy to commit extortion and assault. You are just as culpable as he is." The deputies moved in. They grabbed Bo by the arms and pulled him to his feet. He offered no resistance. He went slack dead weight made of shame and ruin. They cuffed him, the metal clicking shut with a sound of absolute finality. The room seemed to exhale. The violence was done. The law had come. But the betrayal wasn't finished yet. Sloan was huddled in the corner by the fireplace, knees drawn to her chest. When the deputies moved toward her, she lurched upright, eyes wide and frantic. She stabbed a trembling finger at Bo. "It was him!" she shrieked. "All of it was him. He dragged me here. I wanted no part of this." Bo looked at her, his eyes gone flat. "What?" "He is crazy," Sloan cried, turning to the sheriff. "He has been talking about killing his father for weeks. He told me he needed money to cover his gambling debts. He said if I didn't go along, he would come after me too. I am a victim. I tried to run. It was a masterful performance. If I hadn't stood in that kitchen and heard her plotting, if I hadn't heard her call me a liability, I might have been taken in. She was feeding her husband to the wolves to pull herself free." Bo stared at her. The flatness left his eyes, and something else moved in pure, undiluted hatred. He fought against the deputies holding him. "You liar!" Bo screamed. Spit flew from his lips. "It was your idea from the start. You were the one who found the poorhouse. You were the one who told me to mortgage the farm. You said you wouldn't marry me unless I had money. He is lying." Sloan sobbed, fresh tears running down her face. "He is a monster. Look what he did to his own father. I was frightened for my life. You wanted the golf course, Bo roared. You wanted the clubhouse. You called him a stinky old man. Don't you dare put this on me. That is enough, the sheriff bellowed. You can tell your stories in the interrogation room. Get them out of here. The deputies hauled Bo toward the door. He was still screaming at Sloane, cursing her, cursing me, cursing the world that had cheated him of what he believed was his. Another deputy took hold of Sloane. She didn't resist physically, but her mouth never stopped. I am a Whitley, she shouted. You cannot arrest me. My father will have every one of your badges, Daddy tell them. She looked to Prescott, expecting him to ride to her rescue. But Prescott was already in cuffs, being walked out by another officer. He looked old and deflated. He didn't so much as glance at his daughter. His mind was already on his frozen accounts and his shattered reputation. Lorinda followed behind him, weeping without sound, her shoes grinding through the broken glass. They were marched out in a line. My son, my daughter-in-law, my in-laws, the family I had believed I was building. Paraded past me like prisoners of war. Bo stopped as he drew level with me. The deputies pushed at his back, but he planted his feet. He looked at me one final time. His eyes were red and swimming. Why didn't you just die? He whispered. It would have been so much simpler. I looked at him. The anger was gone. The hatred was gone. In their place was a vast echoing emptiness where my love had lived. Easy is for people who don't have to face themselves in the mirror, I said. Goodbye, son. The deputy drove him through the door. I watched him swallowed up by the pulsing lights of the cruisers outside. The room fell quiet all at once. Gideon crossed to where I stood. He rested a hand on my shoulder. Are you all right, Harlow? He asked, keeping his voice low. I looked around the room. The shattered window, the splintered door frame, the scattered papers, the shotgun lying on the floor. It was wreckage. It looked like the aftermath of a battle. I am alive, I said. They are going away for a long time, Gideon said. Attempted murder assault with a deadly weapon conspiracy extortion, breaking and entering on top of the fraud charges from the bank. They won't see the outside of a cell for 20 years. I nodded. Justice. It was supposed to feel like something. It was supposed to feel like victory. It didn't. It felt like an amputation. I had cut out the rot, but I had lost something along the way that I would never grow back. What about the lithium? I asked. Gideon's smile was a tight, grim thing. The lithium is secure. The trust is ironclad. They cannot lay a finger on it. Even without the prison sentences, it would be beyond their reach. You won, Harlow. You saved the farm. I moved to the window. I watched the patrol cars pull away, sirens fading into the night. I watched their red tail lights shrink until they were nothing but distant pinpoints in the dark. I saved the dirt, I said. But I lost the crop. Gideon came and stood beside me. You can always plant again, Harlow. The soil is still good. I looked at him, my friend, my brother, in all the ways that counted. He was right. The soil was still there. Nadette was still there beneath the oak tree. The memories were still held inside these walls. Yes, I said. We can plant again. I turned away from the window. I picked the baseball bat up off the floor and leaned it against the wall. I gathered the folder of papers and set it on the table. I lifted the shotgun and returned it to the cabinet. Then I began to clean up the glass one shard at a time. It was slow work, but I had time. I had the rest of my life, and for the first time in a long while, that life was mine alone. The interrogation room at the Loran County Sheriff's Department smelled of stale coffee and industrial cleaner. It was a small, windowless box painted a shade of gray, so flat and lifeless it seemed engineered to drain the hope from anyone who sat inside it. Bo sat on one side of the metal table, his wrists cuffed to a steel bar bolted to the floor. Prescott Whitley sat beside him, looking like a punctured balloon stuffed into a ruined tuxedo shirt. They had spent the night in the holding cell. The adrenaline of the confrontation had burned away completely, leaving nothing behind but the cold, unforgiving reality of where they were. But even now in chains, the arrogance had not entirely left them. These were men who had lived their whole lives believing money could cure any ailment. They had always understood the law as something that afflicted other people, lesser people, not Whitleys or Canes. I watched them from behind the one-way glass standing next to Gideon. I had no desire to go in there. I had no wish to share their air. I only wanted to see the end. I gave Gideon a nod. He straightened his tie, took his leather briefcase in hand, and walked through the door. When it swung open, Bo looked up. A desperate flicker of hope crossed his face. He pulled himself upright, the chains rattling. "Gideon?" he said, his voice scraped raw from a night of screaming. "Thank God, you're here to represent us right. Dad sent you. I knew he wouldn't leave me sitting in here. He knows I'm his only heir." Prescott leaned in, eyes narrowing. "Listen, Gideon, this whole thing is a misunderstanding, a family dispute that got out of hand. We are prepared to make a deal. We will drop any counterclaims against Harlow for emotional distress if he drops the charges. And we need to discuss the asset management. I obviously cannot oversee the lithium project from inside a cell, but I have associates who can set up the right trust structure." Gideon said nothing. He walked to the empty chair across from them and sat down. He set his briefcase on the table and worked the latches open. The sound was sharp in the small room. Snap, snap. He drew out a single thin file folder and placed it flat on the table. He folded his hands on top of it. "I am not here to represent you," Gideon said, his voice even and dry. "I represent Harlow Kane, and I represent the entity that actually carries weight in this conversation." Bo let out a nervous, dismissive sound. "What entity, Dad, is the entity? He owns the land, and I am his son. Even if I serve a few years, I am still next of kin. You cannot rewrite biology, Gideon. When the old man passes, that $500 million flows to me. That is the law." He cut his eyes to Prescott, looking for agreement. Prescott gave a slow nod. "That is exactly right. You can lock us up, but you cannot strip the inheritance. That mineral deposit is a family asset. We are willing to negotiate a percentage for legal costs, but the bulk of it stays with Bo. We are thinking about the long view here." They were still at it, sitting in handcuffs with 20 years of prison staring them in the face for attempted murder, and they were still running the numbers, still mapping out how to spend the lithium money. It was a sickness, a disease of the soul that had hollowed out everything human inside them. Gideon regarded them with an expression caught between pity and contempt. He opened the file folder. "You boys are making a fundamental error," Gideon said. "You are operating on the assumption that Harlow Kane owns the lithium." Bo frowned. "Of course he owns it. He owns the farm. We checked the deed. Surface and subsurface rights were both intact when Granddad bought it in 1940. We did our due diligence." "You checked the 1940 deed," Gideon agreed. "But you never looked at the transfer records from 10 years ago." "Transfer records?" Bo asked. His face went still. "What transfer records?" Gideon slid a document across the metal table. It was a photocopy of a deed of transfer stamped with the official seal of the county clerk, dated 10 years ago, 2 weeks after Nadette died. "Read it," Gideon said. Bo strained forward as far as the cuffs would allow. He read. I watched through the glass as his eyes tracked across the lines. I could see the moment the words reached his brain. His pupils widened. His mouth came open just slightly. He stopped breathing. Prescott, impatient, craned his neck to see. "What does it say?" "It says," Bo whispered, his voice barely holding together, "it says that Harlow Kane severed the estate." Gideon nodded. "That is correct. 10 years ago, your father came to me. He was deep in grief. He was thinking about the future. He wanted to make certain the land would go on serving a purpose even when he was no longer there to work it. So, we divided the rights. Harlow Kane retained the surface rights, the right to farm, to live in the house, to walk the fields." "And the minerals?" Prescott demanded. "Who owns the minerals?" Gideon smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a trap closing. "The mineral rights," Gideon said, savoring every word, along with all subsurface assets known and unknown, were transferred in their entirety into an irrevocable charitable trust. A trust, Bo said the word coming out flat and hollow. "The Nadette Kane Memorial Trust," Gideon said. "A non-profit organization established to provide agricultural scholarships and housing support for underprivileged youth throughout Georgia." The room went silent. The air conditioner's hum seemed to fill the whole room. Bo stared at the document in his hands. He shook his head slowly. No, that can't be right. Dad doesn't have any trust set up. He's a farmer. He wouldn't know the first thing about that. He knew enough to bring me on," Gideon said. "And he knew enough to understand that money has a way of turning people. He wanted to keep the legacy intact." Prescott looked like the floor had dropped out from under him. He sagged back against his chair, the chains pulling taut at his wrists. So Harlow doesn't own it, Prescott wheezed. No, Gideon said. Harlow is simply the name guardian of the trust. He manages what sits on top. For his service in that role, he draws a stipend. How much? Bo asked. His voice had dropped to almost nothing. What's the stipend amount? $1 a year, Gideon said. $1. Bo looked up at Gideon. His face had gone blank with pure shock. $1. That is correct, Gideon said. Your father has been sitting atop a fortune for 10 years and hasn't touched a cent of it. He lives off what his crops bring in. He lives off his own labor, because he believes that what the earth yields belongs to what comes after, not to his own pocket. Bo began to laugh. It was a high fractured sound, like broken glass being ground down a drain. So, you're telling me? He choked out. You're telling me that I tried to murder my own father. I tried to manipulate him into a psych ward. I put a mortgage on the farm. I wrecked my own life. I'm headed to prison, and I did every last bit of it to steal from a charity. Gideon closed the folder. Essentially, yes, Gideon said. You tried to rob orphans, Bo, and you came up empty. Bo went quiet. He stared down at the metal table. The full weight of his situation was caving in on him like a building coming down. It wasn't simply that he had lost. It was that there had never been anything to win. Even if everything had gone his way, even if he'd driven me out of my mind, even if he'd had me killed, he would have inherited the surface rights to a farm he couldn't sell, because it was bound to a trust he couldn't break. He would have wound up with a tractor and a house. But the millions, the white gold beneath the soil, it was never his to claim. It never could have been. He had sold his soul and been paid back in counterfeit currency. Prescott turned on Bo. Their alliance of greed collapsed in a single breath. You idiot! Prescott screamed, spitting in Bo's face. You told me you'd checked every angle. You said the assets were liquid. You pulled me into this mess. I lost my business on your word. I'm going to jail because of you. It's your fault. Bo screamed right back, lunging at Prescott until the chains yanked him short. You were the one who was desperate for money. You drove this whole thing. You and that greedy daughter of yours. You pushed me into it. Gentlemen, Gideon said, rising from his chair. His voice cut clean through their shouting. Save that for whoever shares your cell. I simply wanted you to hear this before the trial. There is no deal on the table. There is nothing left to bargain with. Harlow has nothing to offer because he owns nothing. He picked up his briefcase. And one more thing, Gideon added, turning toward Bo. The trust contains a morality clause governing any potential beneficiaries. Any convicted felon is automatically barred from receiving aid or any association with the trust whatsoever. So even if you walk out in 20 years, son, you won't be eligible to apply for so much as a scholarship to learn which end of a plow goes in the dirt. You are severed, completely and permanently. Bo looked at Gideon. Then he looked toward the mirror where he knew I was standing. He couldn't see me, but he felt it. Dad, he screamed. Dad, please. You have the power to change the trust. You can undo this. Don't leave me to rot in here for nothing. I stood there and watched him scream. I watched him plead. A strange, quiet peace moved through me. It was the peace of a final harvest. The work had been seen through. The weeds had been pulled up from the root. I turned away from the glass. I had heard everything I needed. Gideon walked out of the room and pulled the heavy door shut behind him, swallowing the sounds of a man unraveling. He looked at me and gave a single nod. It's finished, Harlow, he said. I nodded in return. I straightened my hat. Let's head home, Gideon, I said. I've got fields that need turning, and Nadette's garden wants replanting. We walked out of the police station into the full glare of a bright morning. The air hit clean. It carried rain and good soil. It carried the smell of something beginning fresh. I was 67 years old. I had no son. I had $1 a year, and I was the wealthiest man alive. The gavel struck the block with a sound like a vault door sealing shut forever. The courtroom held its breath as Judge Orville read the sentence. 15 years in a federal penitentiary for Bo Kane. The charges formed a ledger of betrayal conspiracy to commit murder, wire fraud, elder abuse. My son stood there in his orange jumpsuit, and for the first time I could remember he looked diminished. He didn't look at the jury. He didn't look at a weeping Sloane in the gallery. He looked at me. His eyes were dry and hollow. He shaped the word goodbye with his lips, but nothing came out. I watched the bailiffs take him away. The chains around his ankles clinked with a rhythm that sounded like a funeral march. I felt no joy. I felt no triumph. I felt the heavy settling finality of a harvest, that had grown nothing but weeds. The collapse of the Whitley dynasty came faster and hit harder than their climb up had ever been. With their assets frozen and their name in ruins, creditors moved in like a swarm. I stood among the onlookers at the auction a month later and watched strangers place bids on their furniture, their paintings, their silver candlesticks. Prescott stood outside the iron gates, watching his life get carried off arm by arm. He looked deflated and old inside a suit that had become too large for him. He tried to catch my gaze, but I looked straight through him as though he weren't there. They lost everything. The mansion, the cars, the country club membership gone. Evicted 2 weeks after that. The irony was sharp enough to draw blood. The only housing they could qualify for was in the East Ward housing projects, the very place they had schemed to send me. They were now squeezed into a cramped apartment with paper-thin walls and the smell of boiled cabbage, surrounded by the very people they had always looked down on. And Sloane, the ice queen, who had fussed over her image above all else, found her new circumstances the hardest thing to stomach. She wasn't anyone's socialite now. She was a convict's wife and a failure's daughter. I crossed paths with her a few months on. I'd pulled into a roadside diner for a cup of coffee, and there she was, wearing a stained apron and flat shoes, topping off mugs for truckers who had no interest in her family name. She spotted me in the booth. Her hand shook and coffee spilled across the table. She opened her mouth, maybe reaching for an apology, maybe working up to a plea, but then she caught what was in my eyes. It wasn't anger, it was indifference. She closed her mouth, turned her back, and disappeared into the kitchen. She had spent her whole life expecting to be waited on, and now she was the one doing the waiting. Justice has its own way of evening the scales that no courtroom could ever replicate. The farm held, the soil held, but the world sleeping beneath it had finally stirred. The mining operation got underway 3 months after the trial concluded. It was nothing like the gouging strip mine Bo had dreamed of. The Nadette Kane Memorial Trust brought in engineers who understood how to pull the lithium out with precision and care. They built the access points well away from the house, away from the fields hidden behind the tree line. The low, steady hum of the equipment became the land's own heartbeat, a quiet reminder of the fortune buried beneath the roots of my cotton. The money began to move. It didn't flow toward sailboats or penthouses. It went where it had always been meant to go. The trust paid for scholarships for county kids who had the grades and not the means. It fixed leaking roofs for widows. It stocked the school library with books. But the board of directors pressed for one change. They called me into a meeting at the new office they had built in town. They sat me down at a long table that smelled of lemon polish. Harlow, the chairman, said, "You have done something real for this community, but $1 a year isn't a wage. It's an affront. We put it to a vote. They slid a contract across the table to me. It was a salary for my role as guardian of the surface rights. It wasn't $500 million, but it was more money than my hands had ever held at one time. It was enough to stop worrying about the cost of seed every spring. It was enough to fix the roof and put a fresh coat on the barn. It was enough to buy a man his dignity back. I went straight to the dealership and drove home in a brand new tractor, a Kubota with an enclosed cab and air conditioning and a radio. I paid cash. The salesman glanced at my overalls and paused for just a half second, but then his eyes dropped to the check and his smile spread wide and genuine. I took the long way home, driving it slow, letting the cool air wash over me while the radio worked through a blues set. I pulled it into the barn beside the old rusted machine. I laid my hand on the hood of that worn-out workhorse and thanked it for every season it had given me. But I knew the days of sweating through my shirt under a punishing sun were behind me for good. I brought in a crew to work on the house, not to gut it, but to bring it back to life. They pulled off the rotting porch boards and put down solid new ones. They painted the siding a clean, bright white that caught the light and held it. They sorted out the plumbing and rewired what needed rewiring. They put Nadette's garden back in the ground, planting the south pasture thick with zinnias and marigolds, until the whole stretch looked like a patchwork quilt, stitched from color. I sat in my new rocking chair on the porch and watched it all come together. The house seemed to exhale. It was safe again. It was home again. It is a Tuesday afternoon toward the tail end of spring. The air hangs heavy with pollen and the smell of soil turning over. I am out on the porch with a glass of sweet tea, the cold of it beating onto my hand. The yard is loud. It is the best kind of loud there is. Children laughing. A yellow school bus sits in the driveway, and 20 kids from the inner city scholarship program are loose in the fields. They are chasing butterflies. They are crouched in the dirt with plastic shovels. They are learning where the food on their plates actually begins. They are learning that dirt isn't something to be afraid of or cleaned off. It is something alive. One boy, about 10 years old, breaks away from the group and comes walking up toward the porch. He is wearing brand new sneakers and working very hard to keep them that way. He fixes me with a pair of wide, curious eyes. "Mr. Kane," he says. "Is it true what people say?" "What is it they say, son?" I ask, keeping my chair in its slow rock. "They say you're a millionaire," the boy says. "But you look like a farmer." I smile at that. I take in his sneakers. I take in the fields rolling out to the tree line, green and full. I look over at the oak tree where Nadette is resting in the shade. "I'm a farmer's son," I tell him. "That is the truest thing about me. The money is just manure. It doesn't do a thing for you, sitting in a pile. It only matters when you spread it around and let something grow. Leave it heaped up, and all it does is stink." The boy gives this a slow, solemn nod, like I have just handed him something he intends to keep. Then he wheels around and sprints back to his friends who are hollering about a worm they've dug up. I lift my glass and take a long sip. Sweet and cold. I close my eyes and turn my face up to the sun. I can feel Beatrice sitting right there beside me. I can hear her voice moving through the wind. "You did good, Harlow," she whispers. "You protected the land. You protected our name." I open my eyes. The sun is going down, pulling the sky into shades of purple and gold. That is where Harlow Kane's story lands. Not in a courthouse, not in a headline. In a rocking chair on a porch, he almost lost watching children chase butterflies through fields that nearly got stolen right out from under him. This road cost him sleep, his health, and the last years he might have spent simply being a father. He had to become something harder than a father before justice had any room to move. I believe God does not always work on the schedule we would choose, but looking back on everything Harlow endured, it is difficult to argue that the timing was anything but exact. The lesson is not that patience feels good, it does not. The lesson is that it works. If you are in the middle of your own long wait, whether you are facing a family, revenge story of your own, or watching someone take advantage of a person you love, I want to leave you with what this story taught me. Never sign away your leverage before you understand what you are signing. The paper in front of you may carry more weight than anyone is letting on. Build your protection before you need it. Harlow and Gideon set their failsafe in place 5 years early. By the time the threat arrived, the answer was already waiting. Greed has a ceiling. The people chasing a fortune they have not earned will almost always outrun their own understanding of what they are really after. And for those of us in the adults 50-plus season of life, do not let anyone convince you that your age is a weakness. Harlow's patience, his long memory, and his quiet preparation were every bit as powerful as anything his enemies brought to the table. If this story spoke to you, leave a comment and tell me what stayed with you. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that the quiet ones are often the most dangerous. And if you have not yet subscribed to Honor Revenge Stories, I hope today is the day. Thank you for spending this time with me. I will see you in the next one.